get back to their seats and... Who's our next man? Wheeler? Doug Wheeler and Frank James.
Doug Wheeler and Adrian Pellin.
Okay. If we're wondering why we're going off the agenda a little bit, is because some people have flights and we're trying to change it around a little bit. Please enter, say your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair and the members of City Council, good afternoon. On behalf of Aon, thank you for letting us testify today to you on public-private partnerships. I'm Doug Wheeler. I'm joined with Adrian Pellin, and we're going to speak on P3s and be available to answer questions. Very quickly, I'm the Regional Managing Director of Construction Services Group for Aon here in Philadelphia, serving construction and energy projects. Briefly, we provide advisory and brokerage services for risk and performance security matters heavily involved with the public-private partnership model. I'm going to pass over to Adrian now to introduce himself, and then collectively we'll discuss just at a high level P3s.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. Again, my name is Adrian Pellin.
You just pushed the microphone away from you again. If you can say your name also for the record.
Sure.
So pull the microphones close because we can't hear. Please. Thank you.
My name is Adrian Pellin. Is that better? Great. So I work at Aon Infrastructure Solutions. We're a risk advisory firm, as Doug mentioned. I spend my entire time focusing on public-private partnerships across various industry segments, particularly in the civil infrastructure space in both Canada and the U.S. I've been doing this for 7 years, lived through a number of cities, and currently I'm in Chicago. And have most recently worked on a number of projects in the East Coast. There was a project in Pennsylvania that was commissioned by PennDOT for the rapid bridge replacement. That was a P3 model. So what we wanted to chat about today is we wanted to be very brief, but just provide a summary of kind of the P3 world as how we see them, essentially. And obviously, I think it's best to kind of describe a P3 just to a very brief extent. I know that the mayor previously commented on their recent transaction. We also wanted to talk about various responsibilities between the public sector and private sector in P3s. How do we mitigate risk? And essentially, what does the market currently look like to some degree? So just looking at the next slide, we talked about privatization a little bit earlier. Obviously, a public-private partnership at its core is not privatization. There are many different levels of a P3. When we think about construction, we think traditionally about design, bid, build. There are various mechanisms in between there, or delivery methods in between design, bid, build, and privatization. I think the most common concept when we think about a public-private partnership is one in which there's design, build, financing, as well as operation and maintenance of a public asset that is performed by the private sector. So this is really just a comparison of the existing delivery methods. Again, looking at the left-hand side, we have a traditional procurement, one in which the government retains an engineer to design a project, then we'll outsource the design and construction to a contractor. They'll generally obviously secure their own debt to pay for the construction, and often either will outsource the operations and maintenance of the asset or have city employees. They also retain a lot of the risk for that performance. Looking at traditional P3, when we talk about design, build, finance, operation, and maintenance, we have a government entity, as a procuring sponsor, initiating the project and basically outsourcing the responsibilities, as I highlighted, to the concessionaire, who then arranges for debt and partners with equity to finance the construction. And whether or not they have their own firm to actually build the asset, often these concessionaire entities do. They will build it and then maintain it for 25 to 50 years. Just wanted to pass it over to Doug just to comment on this issue.
As we heard earlier today in previous testimony, P3s take various type of forms. So some you will have availability payments or tolling, as it's often referred to, payments, which might be similar to utility charges. This is an example of an energy savings program whereby savings is actually the compensation for the government agency. So you would partner with them to develop energy savings. This has been widely accepted by the Department of Energy and sponsored, and it just offers a different type of model for alternative project delivery, suggesting that as people come to the city, there are different mechanisms to develop this type of a structure.
So again, talking about the financing of P3s, which we obviously think are quite important, this is typically a structure of how a concessionaire entity would finance the project. 10 to 40%, and typically 10% in North America of their own equity is used. And then obviously the rest would be commissioned through debt. Obviously, I think when we think about P3s, I think one of the biggest challenges that we continue to discuss, at least commercially, is the cost of capital is really the deciding factor in determining whether or not we move forward with the P3. Governments obviously can procure capital using tax-exempt debt. It's not always the case with the private sector, and obviously that becomes an important role in determining whether or not to proceed with the project. So this is where we often get very much involved, not necessarily doing the analysis, but when it comes down to risk allocation, we're risk advisors. And the ultimate study that is usually commissioned on behalf of a procuring authority to evaluate whether or not to proceed with a public-private partnership, whether it's a design build or design build, operate and maintain, or including the financing, is to commence a study called the value for money assessment or value for money study. This is often the case for most projects, and is a tool that's actively used currently in this state by the Penn DOT. For example, on the left-hand side, we look at a traditional delivery method where the government or sponsoring authority who's maintaining a public asset, building an asset, has a number of various risks. So obviously there's financing risks, they're retaining various other risks where we get very much involved in. We talk about environmental risk, we talk about construction risks, operation and maintenance, force majeure risks, et cetera. What the comparison in these studies really comes down to comparing a traditional procurement method and trying to quantify the various risks associated with that traditional procurement method versus some form of public-private partnership. So on the right-hand side, you look at the alternative procurement method, which would be design, build, finance, operate, and maintain. And basically, a lot of the risk that the public sector would normally retain under a normal project or delivery method is passed to the private sector. So reduces the overall cost of risk to the project. Obviously, the financing cost is generally higher in the private sector, as I highlighted earlier, but this is really a mechanism which is used to compare whether or not to proceed with one procurement method or the other.
And this is specifically referring to a typical civil project, a specific project in civil infrastructure, but it has application, again, the value for money, looking at other things that might come up from a utility standpoint or other type of concession agreements.
There are no hard and fast rules on risk allocation and what risks are borne by the private sector or retained or shared. Very much we get involved with the commercial negotiation of those risks and how they're allocated. Insurance is usually an integral tool to manage or transfer those risks to third parties thereafter. But again, looking at it from a much more high-level perspective, the left-hand side of this slide compares the traditional risk and a normal procurement that will be maintained by the owner or sponsoring entity. Talked about design. Obviously, designers typically have very low limits on their limitation of liability. There's financing exposure, facility management, et cetera. Looking at alternative procurement methods such as P3, usually the owner sets the performance specifications, but pushes to the private entity the financing, design risks, construction risks. So if there are any errors or cost overruns resulting out of those issues, obviously it's borne by the private sector. And there's life cycle costs. So they obviously are responsible for maintaining the assets. So if there are routine maintenance costs, capital expenditures, they will be responsible for those in the long term over the course of 20 to 50 years, depending on the project type. Just to kind of cap off, I'm obviously being very sensitive to time, but there are a number of challenges I think it's important to highlight. I think fundamentally we talk about public-private partnerships, and it is really a matter of risk allocation and an equitable balance of risk. There's not one tool or hard and fast rule for this risk allocation methodology, depending on where the project's located. Environmental issues are obviously very important, depending on where you are. It could be natural weather perils, et cetera. So there are a number of risks that I think need to be considered. If there's an equitable risk transfer, the project's most likely to get off the rails. Principally, we've dealt with a lot of projects where there's been inaccurate forecasts around traffic, for example, and we've seen bankruptcy of various tolling entities. So, there are a lot of aspects to it that have had some challenges. I mean, this has resulted in renegotiated deals or partners walking away. And we've, in very few occasions, actually seen public assets falling into disrepair, but it's obviously something to consider. So that is really the end of our discussion. We have left some additional slides for you just for your own review on the current state of the market in P3s in the U.S., the size of the market globally, and obviously are available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
That happens in the insurance industry.
Madam Chair, if I may. So, I mean, this is a lot to digest, just paging, probably at least it is for me,
Yes.
Just paging through this. But do you see, just from a general perspective, a good opportunity here in the city of Philadelphia for a P3 opportunity?
Clearly,
And to what level would you think that opportunity is available to us?
Clearly, it's worth investigating. When you listen to the mayor speak before about solving pension issues, and the increase in the credit rating of the city has a very substantial impact on total debt cost. So it's not just monetizing the asset and looking at what your other limitations are. You're compounding that by a potential increase in the credit rating of the city, if that were to occur. So the monetization aspect is not just the impact of that asset, but the overall impact of debt for the city. So we have seen that the P3 process has developed a maturity of risk management, and that's contractual risk, performance security, the performance of the project, and life cycle quality. So much more so today, people are looking at the integrity, whether it be pipelines or concrete and infrastructure quality, and the P3 has some accountability on that. They're building with operations and maintenance cost in mind as well.
And there's a tremendous amount of risk, I would imagine, in, if there were to be a P3 negotiated, and then I guess that will all go, it'll all take place in your design management, trying to structure the deal. Now, with the city, so in a P3 opportunity, specifically with PGW, would the private entity assume all the risk, or is that a negotiated?
Typically negotiated.
Yeah, it's negotiated. I mean, I think early on in the process, you would probably retain outside advisors who would obviously be industry experts on obviously, the gas industry in particular, on P3s, to help put out a request for qualifications from various parties interested in participating in the project. Usually in that study, there would be an outline of the various, risk allocation, methodologies in there. So normally what I would expect to see is on almost a checklist basis, various types of risks that would be retained by the city, and then the other risks that would expect to be transferred, or some that are shared. And sometimes we've seen sharing can be, very beneficial, where you have a certain layer up to a threshold that the city would retain a risk, and then beyond that point it would be the private sector. So it's very much a commercial discussion. I think usually what happens is the initial point comes across, goes out to the private sector, and then the bidders would negotiate, with the sponsoring entity thereafter to ensure that there was a commercial agreement on what the appropriate risk allocation would be.
Man, you talk fast. Can you talk about the risk in the debt aspect in your pyramid slide that you have there? I mean, that seems like a lot of risk. How would you see that? I mean, is that standard when it comes to structuring a P3?
I'll take that, sure. It is common to have an equity piece where someone's putting in their personal investment and then using lenders to come forward. We have found through many of the public-private partnerships that we consider the debt to be more cautious, because they are putting in a less secured position than the typical asset holder. So they're looking for certainty around insurance items, There are lender technical advisors making sure that the project is constructible if it's a new type of construction, or that the deal is feasible, so they can understand whether it be tolling or tariffs or the inbound revenue from, let's say, even the gas clientele. They're looking at all those measurables to make sure that there is some certainty around that. So debt is common. The insurance industry also has performance security options that can be in the form of a surety bond. Sometimes a letter of credit can be utilized, and that works as a base to meet certain core requirements to make sure that there's financial adequacy to protect the city, to make sure that the asset or the investment doesn't fall into disrepair.
Okay, because are there limits? I mean, you see the range from 10 to 40% in equity. Are there? I mean, you set that as a part of the structured deal, but are there regulated limits to the amount of equity that you can invest in the P3?
Not that I'm aware of. That would be the proposing team and how they come forward to make the proposal, and then how they make the financial package viable. And often the debt, though, is rated by the rating agencies, and there needs to be sufficient quality in that to make sure that the debt is priced in a manner that's efficient to be competitive.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Councilman.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I just wanted to clarify that I appreciated the mayor's success and his success in the P3. I did want to, however, clarify for the public that we don't have an asset that we could sell or lease to resolve the financial debts of this city that we're facing. 242 million or 400 million, that does not come anywhere near the financial issues that we face. Up until 2003, our pension payments were about $200 million. And last year, and in the foreseeable future, they're around $600 million. So from $200 million to $600 million. So there's a $400 million increase that we're dealing with because of the MMO and some other things that have to be dealt with. And because of the school debt and other things, even though that's not our responsibility as a city, you see the cigarette tax, the property tax proposal, and other things. So I'm only saying that because I think the public has to understand, when they're looking at how they prioritize and what the issues are that they want us to resolve, that we don't have something to sell, lease, cut expenses, increase taxes on. We really, if we have an asset or an opportunity to create new revenues, we would be very interested if they were able to produce a certain amount of money for us to move forward on that. However, we don't have the funds to finance it, and what you're talking about, the P3 opportunity, is something that we would be very interested in exploring and putting together, so that not using public funds but private funds, and as you said, bearing the risk, we could get new dollars in that could be applied to the issues that we have to be responsible for in providing public services. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The mayor created lease arrangements with the county. Does this apply to a deal such as what he did with Allentown?
I would agree that I'm not familiar intimately with that transaction, but from what he's described, the mayor described, I would say yes, it's very similar to the process we've described here today.
So tell me, what would the plan look like going with the PGW if PGW were to be involved in a deal, since that's sort of like the asset that folks want to get rid of?
So, I mean, I think ultimately, and I'm certainly not the expert in this space as it relates to PGW, but what I would suggest is that a feasibility study be commissioned to evaluate the various procurement methodologies, such as P3, for example, And I think that would be an important way to really flesh out the various issues, and I think to determine whether or not it would be eligible for a P3, frankly. I think when we think about this P3 model, there are various methods in which it can work. One is, as Doug had highlighted, was an availability payment. So that's essentially just a payment for making the asset available, which is traditionally used in other industry segments such as water and other assets like highways, bridges, et cetera. I think when it comes to obviously a gas utility, it's a little bit different. It's probably tied to throughput. I'm certainly not an energy expert, but I would imagine there would have to be some level of revenue sharing. So I think ultimately you would need a feasibility study to basically determine the validity of using this type of model.
So what would a company like yours bring to the table in all of this discussion?
So, I mean, today, obviously, we came as advisors in P3. For me personally, my area of expertise is in risk advisory, so really evaluating the various risks that are, I most often represent concessionaire entities. I have colleagues who work with government agencies in particular, so they're involved much earlier on in the process, but I'm involved from the get-go on once a document is released, such as an RFP. We evaluate the risk allocation, help them negotiate on things that they believe not to be commercially available. We evaluate whether or not they are commercial, and then determine where can we transfer those risks to third parties, whether it's an insurance company or some other contractual methodology to transfer the risks that are assumed to the extent those aren't business risks, so weather risk, et cetera.
Perhaps I can add just quickly. Some states allow for unsolicited proposals where you could have a party come to you and make a recommendation that this might be a valuable option to look at the asset that you hold. Other times, the government agency will specifically develop the RFP process and outline their own specifications. This is exactly what we're looking for, to have measurable bids submitted. So there's two different approaches there. And then as far as Aon's interaction, as we said, at times we work with government agencies helping to, in the early stages, develop risk mitigation RFP type measurements. Other times we're working with the concessionaires to help them purchase and sell that risk into the insurance capital marketplace and provide performance security to make sure there's certainty in the delivery of the contractual obligations. So our typical business is core to insurable risk and performance security, working with the P3 marketplace both for the concessionaires and the government agencies, helping them articulate what's necessary and how to best allocate those items.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we have next Mr. Frank James and, here we go. Mr. Frank James and Mr. and his group.
Good afternoon. How are you? I'm Frank James. I represent Penn America Energy Group, and I just wanted to do something that's slightly irregular, if I may. My partner sitting to the left here, Mr. Sam Hammonds, flew in from Oklahoma. He represents our firm there in Oklahoma and heads that office. Unfortunately, he has a flight to catch at 4:50, so I would like to give Sam a moment to make an introduction, if I may, because he will have to excuse himself in a few minutes.
Sure, go ahead, please.
I apologize, but it is indeed a pleasure to be here.
So the next time you come to Philadelphia for a hearing, take the whole day.
I will definitely do that. I will definitely do that. Frank wanted me to share a little of my background and tell you what my component of this proposed project is. I started in government as well, was administrative assistant for energy and natural resources.
Tell us who you are.
Sam Hammonds, Hammons, and worked for Governor David Boren, later U.S. Senator. Some of you may have known him, and did his energy and natural resources work on his staff. Then the subsequent governor, the governor that followed him, Governor George Nye, same position. Then director of the Oklahoma Department of Energy, and later Secretary of Energy for Oklahoma. And of course, that's a critical industry in our state, the energy industry. Left there and headed a natural gas contracts division of Resource Analysis and Management Group, a big energy consulting firm. Left there, started a Clinton Gas Transmission, which was a natural gas marketing company. And we did the first natural gas marketing transactions, open access, free market transaction in the U.S. Then sold that company, practiced energy law for several years, retired a few years ago, now worked on various energy-related projects here and internationally. And I've joined Penn American. My component of this is to get gas from where it is produced to Richmond Gate here in Philadelphia for use. And you'll hear more from them about the use of that gas and liquefaction. But as you know, there are a lot of variables involved in buying gas, buying it on a spot basis, seeing if we can lock in financeable contracts, possible prepayment of volumetric production in the future. So there are a lot of variables. So you've got a wellhead cost. Then you've got the cost of transporting the gas. As you know, the space getting into Philadelphia right now is full. It's reserved. If we're able to move quickly enough on this idea, then we can maybe take some space on some proposed new additions. As you know, Transco has proposed Atlantic Sunrise Loop, which will bring more Marcellus gas in. There will still need to be some facility infrastructure there, and those are quite expensive, and there are a lot of regulatory hurdles one must cross. So dealing with buying the gas and transporting the gas will be my part of this proposed project. And so I'll be happy to take any questions, even though it's probably a little premature because you haven't heard about the whole project yet, but that's my role, that's who I am, that's my background. And I'll be glad to appear at another time or take questions now.
Yeah.
Mr. Councilman.
Thank you, Chairwoman. How does the gas come into Philadelphia? Is there only one option or more than one option to get the pipe in?
No, there are more than one option. Right now, basically, you're talking about Spectra or Transco. Transco is owned by Williams Companies of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm very familiar with those folks. And so to do any sort of an energy hub project, we're just going to have to increase that capacity to get it into the city.
Could you give us examples, because you're also being televised to the public, so that they could understand what are the opportunities to actually get the gas into Philadelphia physically? How would it come in?
Well, we're looking at basically a couple of options. On the Transco option, we would be negotiating for space for this particular project on Transco's line. If we feel like it's worth going forward, and certainly the merits of the project are there, but if we felt like the city was interested in going forward with this group, then we would commence very serious negotiations about the additional pipeline space which we would need, which, as Frank will point out, will be, about 700 MMCF per day. But if you've got a line, if you've got a right-of-way, and you've already, for example, come under the Delaware River, as Transco has, then you already have a pathway, and you solve a lot of problems that would be inherent in trying to, go through neighborhoods and laying a whole new pipeline.
If I could add to that, the Spectra, Frank James, thank you. The Spectra line is, from what we understand, is there would be a 30-mile extension into the gate station at PGW, the Richmond plant. The work that we've done preliminarily with Williams is it's about a 6-mile extension from their Trenton-Woodbury lateral. So from our perspective, it presents an extraordinary value proposition.
But we're negotiating, so we don't want to say we're settled on anything in particular at this point.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make it clear that it's not simply going through neighborhoods. There are at least one other or some other options of getting the pipe into Philadelphia.
That's right.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you for your time. I'm sorry to have to run.
Go ahead.
I will be back.
All right, thank
And I'll
you.
spend more money next time I come back.
Okay, thank you.
Again, my apologies, Frank James, my apologies for the irregularity. Give you a little idea as to who we are and the genesis of this project. I myself, my background is in iron ore mining. I've been a partner in an iron ore mining operation in India. I've lived there for a number of years and developed close relationships with the former administration headed by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and those relationships extended to specific cabinet posts. As most of the world is aware of the extraordinary energy boom that we are experiencing here in the United States, it was brought to my attention that specifically the Republic of India was looking to procure additional gas. We worked very closely with the Gas Authority of India Limited, which is GAIL, which currently has 2 SPA agreements, one with the Cheniere Sabine Pass project and one with the Dominion Resources project. But that really was the seed that was planted for our company about 3 years ago. We were created actually from inception to be a single purpose entity. We were dedicated ultimately to realizing this opportunity. And the opportunity that we're trying to develop with the City of Philadelphia is expanding PGW's liquefaction capability and building a Pennsylvania-based, Philadelphia-based LNG world-class export terminal. That's our goal. So in doing that, there's, as you can imagine, it's an extraordinary feat. There are many variables to consider, many stakeholders to pull together, but it was important that from the very beginning, being a single-purpose entity, that we assemble a leadership team that has the diverse capability to enable us to hopefully successfully build out this project. So our executive leadership committee is myself. I was the managing director of Indo-American Energy Group. That was the namesake. That was the company that was specific to the trade that we were approaching the city of Philadelphia about 3 years ago. That company was, again, focused solely on a transaction, a sovereign-based contract between the Republic of India, a state-owned entity, GAIL, and a structure that we had not identified, but we'll refer to it as a Philadelphia-based entity. Whether it was PGW or a P3, we weren't able to flush out the appropriate structure. I was also I was the CEO of United Group Holdings, which I mentioned was an iron ore mining operation. We also have an asset in Mexico, which is a copper mine, a copper processing plant, very small. And to round out the executive team, it was very important for us to bring on a firm, specifically Ridge Global, founded and headed by former Governor Tom Ridge. That firm and that leadership brings extraordinary capability and competence for us from a planning perspective, from a strategic perspective, and working with the diverse government agencies that we have to work with. I would like to pass to James Seif, who is a partner with Ridge Global, and have him make an introduction.
I'm Jim Seif, S-E-I-F, head of the Energy and Environmental Practice Group at Ridge Global. I started as a prosecutor in Pittsburgh with Dick Thornburg way back when. I've held the post of Regional Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency here in Philadelphia, the 6-state region, and also under Governor Ridge, the Environmental Secretary position.
James, could you bring the microphone a little closer? Thanks.
My current practice includes natural gas clients, startups, and so on. My interest today is to address any of your questions about regulatory and other issues that may be involved here. The guts of the proposal and the guts of what I would have to say is just this, that sometimes a person gets smart and sometimes they get lucky. And Philadelphia is now coming up on being both. Smart means that you have a PGW and, as Craig says, 4,000 years worth of experience. You have a port that you know how to use, and it's been in use since Stephen Girard sailed it. You have iron in the ground, which means the facility at, in this case, PGW. You have excess capacity of Pennsylvania gas, and you know that you have it, and that's smart. Luck is that the Marcellus vein will run for another 100 years. It will change the energy complexion of the entire planet, whether you live in Poland or Canonsburg, PA. The need in Europe, the need for us all to fight global warming, as the President and Governor Wolf have pointed out. The need to develop new technology now available for the safe production of gas and the safe transport of it. I mean in pipelines, not rail. And all of the new technologies that call for the use of gas, 18-wheelers and tugboats and so on. What we have to do is not realize that we're lucky and smart and be proud of ourselves, but seize the moment. I don't think we have time for the kind of exercise that Mayor Pulaski had to involve. I think with his blazing the trail, we sort of know how to do it and could do it faster. And now here I must respectfully disagree with Phil Rinaldi, who knows more about this than I do, but I do think that turning the assets that we are lucky enough to have and smart enough to recognize, namely the export capacity at Port Richmond, ought to be done. It may be that you can't get the very biggest ships under a bridge or over the bottom of the Delaware at this moment, but you could very productively and very profitably use that facility for, as we heard already, weekly shipments of Marcellus gas to a Europe that desperately needs it. If that could be put together, and if the tolling arrangement proposed here could be effectuated, you would have the kind of assets that you need on an ongoing basis to do a great job. If you want to talk about safety and experience elsewhere and so on, I'd be happy to do that too.
Great, thank you. Sam obviously has given his introduction. Gentleman Francis Cassell is part of our team. This is Frank James. Now, I'll get used to that. Francis actually is one of our lead bankers. Francis has already, he's done extraordinary work. He was one of the managing partners of a firm, NRDC, with Chet Baker. They were very successful in raising about $8 billion in the last 5 years for the acquisitions of Saks Fifth Avenue, Hudson Bay in Canada, Lord & Taylor, and he's truly an expert on structure, building the model, and he's done extraordinary work with us, and he holds a very important position with our firm and has reached out to a number of potential financial funders for this project. So unfortunately, Francis could not be here for today. Our advisory board actually has been dimensionalized by a gentleman, John Immel. John is a oil and gas expert. John has held positions with International Oil and Gas Technology, Nations Petroleum, and he brings a great deal of expertise to our team. Sitting to my left is Stephen Spence, and I will allow Stephen to make his introduction.
Sure. My name is Stephen Spence. I am on the advisory board to Pan American. I've been in the financial industry for over 30 years in various capacities, both in the United States and abroad. I've worked for Merrill Lynch for 17 years, where I set up a number of operations for them throughout Europe, in the Asian markets, both on the derivative side and financing businesses. I've managed globally their derivative operations before ending my career at Merrill and as a COO for their international financing businesses, at which time I left in 2003. And since that time, I've been working as an advisor and consultant to various businesses throughout the United States and the world, developing integrated plantations throughout emerging markets. Most recently, I joined Dominic and Dickerman, based in New York City, an investment banking and merchant banking operation where we focus on, in a broad sense, as generalists, helping middle market firms grow and take them to the next level. I've been working with Frank on this particular project almost since its conception for over 3 years now, and do look at it very much the way we look at our clients that I work with on a day-to-day basis, which is being able to take a company that is very strong with fantastic attributes and finding the right investments and pieces to help that entity grow to something that they never could have achieved on their own.
Great. Our offices were located in New York, 48 Wall Street. We also are represented at the Ridge Global offices in Washington, D.C., and Sam actually handles our Oklahoma operations. Sam's role in the organization and based in Oklahoma is really upstream, working with the midstream energy companies and the energy companies at source. Okay. As you obviously understand, what we want to do is what we believe is really unleash the true value proposition of Philadelphia Gas Works. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the impetus, the inspiration for this project was to identify an opportunity here in the U.S. that we could develop quickly. That's a term which is a loaded term, I'll explain quickly, but that we could develop some sort of traction and momentum for the development and production of LNG for export. So what we tried to do is really look at the global market, understand the appetite, and also look at pricing globally. Looking at this project 3 years ago, we were intent on exporting LNG to the Republic of India. We had interest from 2 Japanese trading groups, early interest that is, from Marubeni and Mitsubishi. We had some interest from SK, but the challenge, obviously, that is inherent to this project is it's not a public company like a Cheniere who decides they want to build out an LNG project. It was what we had identified, obviously, as a unique opportunity with a municipally owned asset. So there are different challenges, obviously, that are inherent to the project, and the process is different. So again, getting back to what I was originally saying, my apologies, is we were looking at Asia, South Asia, from the prospect of they are paying more for gas. It's probably the economics represent a better opportunity. But really, Europe, from our perspective, represents an even better option just based on logistics. Where PGW is positioned on the mid-Atlantic, the opportunity to load a vessel and have it sail to Europe in 4+ days versus 30+ days having an LNG vessel loaded here in the mid-Atlantic and sailing for South Asia or Asia. There's so much counterparty risk inherent to that. So many conditions can change, logistics, issues related to logistics, fuel costs, a number of variables that could certainly interrupt a 20-year contract where a off-taker will declare a force majeure and interrupt that contract. So there are other issues also that have emerged recently in Europe. For example, what has happened with Russia and the Ukraine, and the national security concerns and interests of much of North and South Europe. So that also changed the optics of this project for us, and based on logistics and also based on the national security interests of the United States and our allies in Europe, it really forced us to look at the project differently. In place today in Europe, spread throughout Europe, are anywhere between 25 to 28 regasification terminals. There is one liquefaction terminal in place in Norway. And there is a plan right now in place to build an additional 10 regasification terminals in Europe. And obviously the intention is to, for most of these North and South Eastern European nations, is to diversify their risk, because it's a national security concern. If you look at what has happened with the Ukraine and the national security concerns that they have, because energy is obviously a key component. It has certainly been well documented within the media that the foreign ministers of both Poland and Germany have visited here in the United States. They've reached out to the State Department, and the goal is to see how Europe can take advantage of this extraordinary opportunity that we're living through here in the U.S. Our main objective, as I mentioned, is PGW. And what we're trying to do is something extremely simple. Simple from the perspective of structure, that is. Penn America desires to be a long-term customer of Philadelphia Gas Works and purchase the annual equivalent of 100 billion cubic feet a year of natural gas, processed in the form of LNG. So we're looking at it actually quite simply, and what we say is if PGW today has 500,000 customers, what we hope to be is the 500,001 customer. The only difference is our goal is to purchase 150 billion cubic feet of gas. Certainly a big proposition there. So looking at the asset, we were very excited 3 years ago when, through Governor Ridge's efforts and the team in Washington, had identified this extraordinary jewel that had yet to be untapped, and that is PGW. PGW has two 25 million gallon LNG storage tanks that are FERC approved. That's not to say there won't be challenges in terms of FERC applications, because based on today's regulatory requirements for those tanks, they are just a smidgen too close together, actually. The other opportunity that we see is that PGW has demonstrated extraordinary expertise and capability over the last 40-plus years in producing LNG without any incident. They have what I understand to be a very perfect safety record. And I actually applaud council for ensuring that you held on to that asset, because it's an extraordinary asset and it will be a game changer here in Philadelphia. So what we're hoping to do is the following. Our goal is to contract with PGW, is to fund and manage the expansion of the existing Philadelphia Gas Works Richmond LNG plant into a world-class LNG export terminal, as I mentioned. The following functions Penn America will provide. One is we will work on the permitting. We've identified a law firm in Washington, D.C. that will handle the permitting component. That is Hogan Lovells. Hogan Lovells was successful in getting the Dominion Resources project permitted with FERC and the Department of Energy. We are very fortunate in that the woman who heads that practice, the energy practice for them, Mary Ann Sullivan, was a former general counsel for the Department of Energy. And why we selected Hogan is primarily because of the obstacles that Dominion was faced in bringing their project forward. They had issues regarding environmental litigation and many challenges and concerns, and they were able to successfully navigate around those obstacles. We will handle the engineering, procurement, and construction, known as the EPC. We've identified 2 potential EPCs, one being Bechtel, who actually was the EPC for the Sabine Pass Cheniere project. We've given them complete visibility to the project, as well as many of the challenges that were enumerated in a feasibility study that was contracted by PGW with CH4. And they know the plant actually quite well. From what I understand, that they were involved in, I guess, PGW would actually give you more visibility, but they had shared with me that that initial Cascade unit that was built out about 40 years ago, that was their project. But anyway, nonetheless, don't hold me to that, but they know the asset, they know the plant very well, if I may. Our goal is to bring also a 20-year SPA agreement with a qualified counterparty. That is obviously a contract, as well as a 20-year source of feed gas, which, as Sam had commented, is 700 million cubic feet a day. So that would be our responsibility. And certainly the structure and manage the commercial transaction and provide the financial instrument required not only to fund the transaction in terms of the transaction with the off-taker, but also bring the funding to fund the LNG terminal, the expansion of PGW's LNG terminal. If you look at this image, it basically demonstrates the asset, how we look at it. And what is critical to the success of this project is that underutilized Tioga terminal that is adjacent to the PGW facility. That is a key component to the success of this project. Without that terminal, this project will not be able to move forward. So that's a key component. As I mentioned earlier, the tanks, FERC approved, and obviously the experience of PGW. Looking at an overhead view of the site analysis, the feasibility study that CH4 had constructed enumerated numerous challenges. One I mentioned already, and that is issues related to the positioning of the tanks, and are they compliant with FERC rules, or could they be grandfathered in? Another issue was the proximity of the tanks to the port. And then other issues inherent here are private property issues. Okay. What you can see highlighted in yellow on the screen is PGW property. What is highlighted in red, which I guess looks maroon, is government property, Philadelphia-owned property as we understand it, and what's highlighted in blue is private property. It is our understanding that the private property that is present there is not a major obstacle, and that there are solutions there. However, I do have to point out that there are a few street closures that would have to happen if indeed the project were to go forward. Most notably, I believe it's Delaware Avenue, which is the street that separates PGW and the Tioga terminal. And another one is Castor Avenue, which separates the 54-acre site that is adjacent to the existing terminal or PGW liquefaction plant. That site is important because that's the footprint where we propose to expand and build out a new liquefier. Another issue, which was a major issue, was, and I mentioned it earlier, the hazardous exclusionary zone. And how I mentioned it was that there would be some modifications required to the Tioga terminal. If we were to berth a vessel right along the bulkhead of the Tioga terminal today, and you could see a vessel tied up, the hazardous exclusionary zone, the radiuses would extend too far and really come very close to residential areas. So the solution that CH4 has provided in their study, and I've also been working with them to date as well, but they've proposed evacuating and excavating some of the landfill so that we can move a vessel closer to the tanks, as a result decreasing the radius of the hazardous exclusionary zone. As we mentioned earlier, pipeline capacity is key. There were two options that we were considering. One was the Spectra line, which is roughly, as we understand, about 31 miles away from the PGW gate station, and I'm only referring to the Richmond plant. We've experienced through our research a little bit of a negative headwind with that because of the 3 districts that pipe would have to follow. Although there is a right-of-way in place because there is existing pipeline in place, we thought that we should look at another opportunity, and that is an opportunity that Sam had mentioned with Williams, and that is the Trenton-Woodbury lateral that I mentioned earlier today. So there is a great deal of work, but what was exciting to us is there is a 6-mile stretch of pipe. It's a 16-inch pipe that comes into the Richmond plant. That certainly will not give us the quantity of gas that we would require on a daily basis, but it pointed us what we believe is in the right direction and in the best interest of the residents of Philadelphia. An overhead view of this project, you can see the 2 tanks in the middle of the screen. That is the PGW plant. Adjacent to the right or south is the Kinder Morgan terminal. That terminal discharges ethanol and stores ethanol there at that terminal, and that, from what I understand, that terminal, that storage facility may be expanded. This is what I understand. But why that's important from our perspective is there have been concerns about the type of cargo we're working with, which is LNG, and that type of cargo navigating the waterway. And what we've done is, through the work of our partners in Washington, we've reached out about 2+ years ago to the Coast Guard and tried to really understand the reality of 135,000 cubic meter LNG vessel a week moving and navigating up the river. And what we were told is that, keep in mind, Philadelphia, through the Sunoco plants, has been an energy hub, if you will, in terms of that type of product, for probably close to 100 years. So there have been volatile materials moving up and down the Delaware River on a routine basis. Adjacent to this facility, as I mentioned, is an ethanol plant. And the work that we've done in trying to calibrate the volatility of ethanol compared to LNG, they're both volatile products. Their characteristics are different, but nonetheless, they present the same challenges. So the issue is, obviously, is what are the security measures in place, and also the type of vessels that are carrying those products up and down the river. Another issue that we had to be cognizant of there are 4 bridges. There's the Ben Franklin Bridge, which is a gating factor, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. There's the Walt Whitman Bridge. There's the Commodore Barry Bridge, and there's the Delaware Memorial Bridge. So it was very important for us, knowing the access to the Atlantic Ocean, what the challenges would be downstream, and could we benchmark any programs or any transit, if you will, of LNG in the United States today? Are there any other platforms in place? And we identified one. This demonstrates the path to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, important benchmarks for consideration. One is in Boston, there's a district gas LNG regasification terminal that has been operating successfully since 1971 without any incident. And why is that an important benchmark? Well, the city of Boston is there. There are 3 bridges that LNG vessels have to navigate under. There's Logan Airport. There's a deep water channel that runs extremely close to the shoreline, and compared to the Philadelphia shoreline, it's a much more grand and built-up shoreline with commercial and residential property. I mentioned the Kinder Morgan Discharge Terminal, which has been operating successfully without any issue, adjacent to the existing plant. and as I mentioned earlier, the extraordinary history that Philadelphia has with refining and the transport of other materials. So here we are. This is a picture taken on a beautiful sunny day that I hope we see here in Philadelphia soon of a vessel, one that travels on a weekly basis, and it has been doing so successfully since 1971. We think there's a direct correlation between that and what we are proposing here in Philadelphia. The routes that they take, although are not as long to the mouth of the Atlantic Ocean, but you'll see similarities in the slides that I'm going to show you. That happens to be the loading arms and cryogenic lines that when LNG is discharged, that's where it's placed. That's where the berthing is. Just move you forward. You can see the city of Boston, Logan Airport to the right of your screen, and the pathway that a vessel will take to leave the city. This is the Kinder Morgan Discharge and Storage Terminal that I had mentioned earlier. So this is the value proposition for the city of Philadelphia. The project that we are proposing, Philadelphia Gas Works, will remain a public asset. There will be no capital investment from the city of Philadelphia. And based on the structure of the transaction, which will be based upon a tolling agreement, we are estimating that it will bring to the city about $150 million a year. It will bring to PGW $150 million a year in revenue through a 20-year SPA agreement with an off-taker, with a rollover provision. That, we think, is an extraordinary proposition. I want to just talk through and bring us back to some of the questions that you've asked in relationship to a P3 structure and how that structure relates to our project. And I think it's important to note a public-private partnership structure is not the desired structure due to the following considerations for our proposal. A P3 structure will transfer public assets into a private entity. A P3 structure will privatize public job opportunities. We worked through this with a law firm here in Philadelphia headed by Bill Sasso, Stradley Ronan, and we've discussed different options that we should consider. 3 years ago, when we approached PGW, that happened to be the structure that has been discussed, variations of a P3. And based on the nature and context of what we're offering the city, for us it represents something that's suboptimal. There's a lot of change in governance that we believe will have to happen, and for us it's a longer road. Timing for us is critical. So what is our goal? Our collective goal should be to establish the appropriate platform, and we're referring to it as a public and private collaboration. We believe that there's more work that needs to be done with the city solicitor, as well as counsel for PGW and with Stradley Ronan's team, and really try to come up with the best structure. As I mentioned, Penn America will fund the expansion of the existing PGW Richmond plant with an estimated capital cost of $2.1 billion. Penn America Energy will own the asset, meaning we will own the plant, the actual physical apparatus, the steel and iron. The actual plant, the ground, will be owned by the city or owned by PGW. The only reason why we're proposing this structure is to get this project funded. We need to be able to position the depreciation with our bankers. Okay, the city cannot write off that depreciation, but our investors can write off that depreciation. What our proposal is to build out a 4.5 MTPA, which is million tons per annum liquefier. That happens to be, as Bechtel refers to this, as an off-the-shelf design. That happens to be the liquefier design that they are building in the Gulf. That is the design for the Cheniere-Sabine Pass project. It's a 4.5 MTPA liquefier. They are building out 6 liquefiers. We're looking to build out 1. Philadelphia Gas Works will not be privatized and will remain an independent public utility. A land lease agreement between the leaseor, Philadelphia Gas Works, and the leasee, Penn America Energy, will be the structure that we're looking to put in place. And my belief, there was a gentleman who testified earlier, Mr. Rubin, if my memory's correct, and benchmarked, is it Mr. Rubin? I'm sorry. Yeah. He had disclosed some other projects that were in place whereby the utility would be able to lease to Penn America. So the land, that 54-acre plot that's adjacent to the existing plant, is the site that we're proposing for this project. So PGW and the City of Philadelphia will continue to own the land. It will remain a public asset. What we're proposing is through a service contract between the seller, Philadelphia Gas Works, and the buyer, Penn America Energy LP, the buyer will pay the seller a tolling fee for liquefaction and stevedoring services. All we've done is benchmark the project that Dominion Resources has, and Dominion Resources has paid a fee per million BTUs to process LNG and to load it through a stevedoring process onto an LNG vessel. So we're ultimately looking to benchmark that same service, that same structure. So PGW will ultimately be the operator of the facility. PGW will produce the LNG, and PGW will load the vessel.
And you would own the tank?
No, ma'am. PGW owns the tank.
I thought you said earlier that you would own the tank.
No, ma'am. What we will do is we will own the actual plant, the steel, the actual plant itself, not the ground. Because what's important to the financing of this project is the depreciation is a key component to this. And a municipality cannot write off that depreciation, but an investor can write off that depreciation. So that's a very important component to funding this project.
The tanks are different from the plant. The plant
Yes.
turns gas that comes from the pipelines we've discussed into liquid. Liquid is then stored with a priority use for Philadelphia customers on the cold winter, is then stored into 2 tanks, which we would not propose to own. The city already does. They've been there 40 years, and they're working fine. So that and would not own the land on which the liquefying equipment is placed, that 54-acre plot.
Our intention is not to privatize anything. If I misspoke or I confused you, I do apologize. It's the actual liquefier when I refer to the plant.
Just tell me, because I'm a little slow right now, it's something to 3. What is it you would own, the tank?
No, ma'am. The tanks
plant?
will continue to be owned by PGW
Okay,
and the
what
City
would
of
you own?
Philadelphia. We will build a liquefier, the actual apparatus, the structure, the actual machine, if you will.
I missed that.
Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, the structure that we're proposing is a tolling fee. It's a fee to be paid to PGW for the process of liquefying natural gas into LNG. So yes, ma'am.
So if you own the liquefier and you and your investors decide to pull out, what happens?
It would be secured by contract with the city, actually, ma'am.
For how long?
Well, the benefit of this project, the term that we're looking at is a 20-year term with a rollover provision for another 10 or another 20 years. It's such an extraordinary opportunity for the investors. To pull out would not be in their best interest, actually. The return on investment will be extraordinary over 20 years. It would be foolish for an investor to pull out of this project early. It's going to take us anywhere between, let's say, 3 to 5 years to build out the project. So there's a great deal of capital that will be invested in this project in the early going. So did you want to add something?
I just wanted to interject. Yeah, the commitment to the project from the investor's perspective is twofold. There is the contractual agreement with PGW, with the city on a 20-year basis. But in order to finance this development, there's going to be commitments and obligations to banks, institutions who are funding it from a debt structure. And they'll be bound into the agreement from for at least 20 years as well from that perspective as well. So it would be virtually impossible for the investors to back out of this once that commitment is made.
How the $150 million...
You're going to have to kind of sum up, because we have another set of people to testify.
Okay.
Because we're not negotiating the deal here today. We're just listening to the
I'm going to articulate
overall
then
idea of what it brings.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to articulate then just what we believe the key value proposition is. Philadelphia Gas Works remains a public asset. There'll be no capital investment from the City of Philadelphia. It's an estimated $150 million per year in additional revenues generated by PGW through a 20-year contract. If you just look at that number, what we believe is it provides an extraordinary solution to the city regarding aging infrastructure. As we understand, just an investment on PGW's part of $25 to $50 million per year could collapse the 80-year or 60-year timelines to replace existing cast iron aging pipe in the system. From also what we understand, just a $50 million investment will reduce the calculated gas rate for the citizens of the city. Certainly, you will be expert in analyzing the dividend, but our belief is that if the dividend is changed, it'll address city pension funds, as well as schools, as well as neighborhood and communities, and also it will assist in the infrastructure development required here in the city to bring additional pipe into the city. Public jobs will not be privatized. Certainly, there will be jobs created in building out an LNG terminal. Those are not long-term jobs, they're short-term. There will be jobs created for plant operations, but we believe the greatest value is the jobs created to replace 1,800 miles of aging pipe in the system, as well as the trickle-down economic benefits. There's one thing that I want to leave you with that is very, very important, and that is this is a municipal project. Compared and contrasted to the Cheniere project or the Dominion project, these are projects that are pioneered by publicly traded companies. This is a municipal project. The true shareholders, we believe in this project, are the citizens of Philadelphia. Okay, they're not who purchased the stock. The benefits, the direct beneficiaries of this project are the citizens. So I think that's very important. Another important point for you to really consider is geopolitically what's happening here in the United States and what's happening in Europe. There's a firm that we're working with in Washington, DLA Piper, is a representative who's sitting here with us today from their New York office. We've been working very closely with them in trying to identify, from a national security perspective, does this municipal project in Philadelphia further the national security interests of the United States and our allies in Europe? And it does. And it does. So it's an extraordinary opportunity and what we believe is a game changer here in Philadelphia. So we seek your support, and we're excited to come back to Philadelphia. We've been away, actually. We re-engaged this project in December of 2014. We have an extraordinary legal team in place. We have working very closely with CH4. They will be our lead in terms of project management for this project. This is right in their wheelhouse, and they know this. They know Philadelphia. They know PGW extremely well. We work with their office in Baltimore, and there are certainly hurdles, but we're prepared, and we think there are solutions for every hurdle. Thank you very, very much for your time.
I just have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
In addition to one. Your project would involve an LNG vessel coming up and down the Delaware River to the Richmond site once a week. Would it be correct that all other traffic on the river would be shut down during this period?
No, ma'am. We've benchmarked the project in Boston, as you saw from the slide that I showed you. There are security measures in place. There are Marine Police. There's Coast Guard, both in the water and in the air. Measures they've taken is they've closed the bridge there for 10 minutes until a vessel passes underneath the bridge. So there are certainly provisions in place that have been benchmarked and that have not been that disruptive.
Your plan requires obtaining the use of the Tioga Marine Terminal. And And how would you go about getting the use of this terminal? And what existing commercial uses of this terminal would have to end to permit your project to go forward?
I can't speak to the business functions of that terminal today. What I understand is that it's an underutilized terminal, but I can't speak accurately as to the amount of cargo that move through that terminal on a weekly basis. That I cannot tell you. There was another question. I apologize. Can you repeat it, ma'am?
I think that was it.
Yeah.
You answered.
Okay. Oh, but you asked me about who I guess we would speak to the Delaware River or the Philadelphia Regional Port Authority about that terminal specifically. Am I correct? Councilman Heenan, I think we talked, no?
No.
No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Excuse me, fellas.
Sorry?
I do have I just want to
Did you have a question?
Just
Please.
another question. So on the line of government approvals, what would you need from the city, state, or federal government to make your project a reality?
Well, certainly a key trigger for us is to establish an exclusivity period for this project. We need to move quickly. That seems to be the trigger for us today, not only with our banks, but also with our off-takers. We've been working with Vitol, Glencore, Trafigura. These are potential off-takers, and they're clients of mine today, actually, Glencore and Trafi. And what everyone has been concerned about, honestly speaking, if I may, is the history here in Philadelphia regarding the sale of PGW and what has transpired. It's something that is certainly not going to cast a negative shadow, but it's very clear that we need to demonstrate that the city of Philadelphia, specifically council and the mayor, are prepared to move this project forward based on the merits that I've articulated. There's a lot that needs to get done. This is, as I said, a $2.1 billion project. It involves 75% debt raise, 25% of it will be equity. We have some investors already interested in the project in terms of the equity component. We've had conversations with Citibank and Credit Suisse. Citi is interested in being the lead bank and putting together the syndicate for this project. But every whether it's banker, law firms that we're working with, counterparties, are looking at the first hurdle. And the first hurdle here is how can we get aligned with the city of Philadelphia on this project? So certainly we would want to enumerate within that exclusivity period certain milestones that have to be met from our part, to ensure the duration of that period. But that will give us the credibility to move forward with the bank, to move forward with the government of Portugal, or the government of Spain. And you may say, well, why are you referring to government? That's our strategy. Our strategy is a top-down diplomatic strategy, considering the national security concerns of Europe today. Their goal is to diversify their risk from Gazprom and Russian, what they term as aggression in Europe. So that's a key component. And based on our conversations with DLA Piper, the law firm who will handle government affairs for us on this project, they said, actually, that's the key component that will make this project a success and get the Obama administration to embrace this project because of the national security interest and that it's our nation's only municipal project.
Let me just say this, and you may leave. The gentleman who had to take the plane
Yes.
talked about the regulatory hurdles that we have to overcome.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have to take that into mind.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Now we have I'm so sorry, the Liberty Energy Trust. Good afternoon. Thank you for waiting and being so patient.
Thank you for
know
having
how
the time to
these,
listen.
Hearings run, and we appreciate your patience.
Well, we want to thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and Chairman Hennon, the other members of council, for giving us a chance to talk to you today about Philadelphia's energy strategy. My name is Charlie Ryan. This is Boris Brevnoff. We hope that today we can propose some ideas to address concerns presented by PGW's aging infrastructure, the urgent need to lower cost for the city's residents and what they pay for their gas, and the need to increase the availability of gas for city residents, businesses, and we also want to talk about some strategies to mobilize private capital and private initiative to partner with the city in your vision for developing an energy hub. We do believe that the best way to approach these objectives is to create a public-private partnership, including PGW. The essential idea behind our proposal is to stop thinking about PGW as a liability to be managed, but rather to start thinking about it as a key part of the energy hub and an engine of economic development. The idea would be to use it to get the gas here for businesses and customers so it's readily available and inexpensive. In a few months since Council began this process of conducting hearings, we've continued to refine our understanding of the opportunity, and we're really grateful for the chance to come back today and tell you what we've learned and make some suggestions and answer some questions. So as I said, I'm Charlie, this is Boris. I grew up here, and for the last 25 years I've worked around the globe on various energy and infrastructure issues. I've helped governments, utilities to modernize and expand their capacities. And I'm also directly involved today in the energy business. I serve on the boards of some companies. One company actually is one of the larger shippers of LNG on the planet, and also some not-for-profits that work in this space. Boris spent his entire career in energy and finance. His most relevant experience that we mentioned at the last hearing had to do with Peoples Energy Corporation in Chicago. It's a company that, as we talked about, has some of the exact same challenges and opportunities that are present at PGW, including, crucially, the cast iron replacement program. So Peoples Gas has already begun its program in 2011. Thus far, they have replaced 35,000 service pipes, and they have retired 245 miles of cast iron conductor. This company, Peoples Gas, continues to proceed with this program. They plan to replace about 2,000 miles of cast iron mains and 300,000 service pipes and meters within the next 20 years. So definitely a lot shorter than the plan we have going on today here in Philly. Last November, we testified before Council in support of a public-private approach to developing Philadelphia into a next-generation energy hub, and we discussed some concrete opportunities, and I'm glad to report we made progress on them, and we hope we can explain a bit more today what we found and what we would suggest. So a few weeks after that testimony in November, we participated in the Greater Philadelphia Next Energy Hub Conference that was sponsored by the CEO Council for Growth, part of the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. And there was an event that united business, labor leaders under this vision of how to leverage the city's unique potential. Today, more than ever, I think we've got an opportunity and a responsibility to combine public and private effort in positioning Philadelphia as this new energy hub. A key focus of the conference was on infrastructure improvements to address safety, bring less expensive and cleaner energy to existing new customers, lower customers' bills, and create jobs. There are three, not just one, but three critical bottlenecks today that exist. The first is this intrastate transport pipeline. This is these big pipes that people are talking about to get the gas to the city. However, I think probably not as much attention, but a lot of additional attention should be paid to the second bottleneck, which are the lateral pipelines, the regional pipeline network. And then clearly the final bottleneck is the local distribution network, the PGW network. And I think we need to be clear that as we look at how to improve the situation and how we look to solve some of the problems, we have to think about a comprehensive approach to looking at solving these three separate bottlenecks. So we continue to believe, as we mentioned in our prior testimony, in a stakeholder approach, combining communities, local and global capital, labor, expertise, business, not-for-profits, and combine this in a citywide effort to build and grow Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Energy Hub, and provide a platform for success. We, Liberty, bring together a bunch of these stakeholders. local investors and businesses, the AFL-CIO, providing a partnership of labor and labor capital, Philadelphia-based endowments and foundations putting up capital, and industry expertise that's complementary to the outstanding expertise that today exists at PGW. We believe a logical next step would be for a platform like ours to engage directly with the city and PGW and see how we could translate a common vision into actual project blueprints and form a framework for a partnership. Private participation in PGW's future, we feel, is essential to improving this aging infrastructure and providing this economic growth. We think it would unlock true economic development potential in the city. PGW's management team has done a remarkable job in keeping the system operating smoothly and safely with a prudent annual maintenance budget, all the while, however, working within existing financial and organizational constraints. And as has been correctly reported, the schedule to fix the infrastructure is not acceptable to anyone. 7 years is way too long. PGW has hazardous leak rates that are high compared to the national average. The Philadelphia Office of Sustainability estimates that the city's leaks in the city's network contribute about 120,000 cars worth of emissions to the atmosphere. Duke and Boston University researchers say that these gas leaks from U.S. gas utilities are the country's largest human-caused source of methane, contributing some $3 billion accounting for $3 billion of natural gas that's lost every year. So there's an environmental component as well to improving the third bottleneck, the local distribution system. So without fresh capital, flexible financing, streamlined, business-minded decision-making processes, innovation and entrepreneurship, we feel it would be difficult to achieve the goals that many have expressed today, and I hope we all have in mind. And we think there's a unique opportunity today to rethink and redesign how the city approaches these challenges, and we think that's through a public-private partnership. The good news is we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can successfully build and improve on existing best practices and leverage Philly's competitive advantages. Other cities are doing very similar things today. Gas utilities in the country spend about $19 billion a year annually to upgrade their systems and improve safety. In the introduction, I mentioned Chicago, which is planning on doing their upgrade in 20 years. In New York, National Grid is currently in a program to replace 1,900 miles of mains and 25,000 services over the next 25 years. Philadelphia's distribution network needs to be upgraded more rapidly too. And again, we think it should be also not just upgraded, but reimagined as an economic development opportunity. And that's what gets us excited. I think there's a lot of ways people might ship gas around the world, but truth of the matter is we feel that the key path to getting jobs created in the city is to figure out a way to improve and increase the availability of gas for people to build businesses here. And I'll come to it in a moment, if we could increase the load in the system going to corporate and industrial customers, it also, experience proves, would help to reduce rates for residential customers. So when utilities are establishing these major replacement programs, like some of the ones that I had mentioned, they'll obviously investigate the possibility of upgrading the service territory from low pressure to medium pressure in advance of sizing the diameter of the replacement mains. Higher pressure systems not only make the system more robust, but it also allows for smaller diameter pipes to be used in the replacement. And what this means then is you can insert these smaller mains into the existing cast iron mains allows you to speed up the process and for there to be, there's some discussion, but less disruption. This has not only been commonplace in Chicago, but it's just what National Grid's doing in New York and other utilities are doing around the country. So initially, city gas distribution networks were created for two simple purposes: for streetlights, the old-fashioned streetlights, and to heat buildings. In the U.S., the load represented by this original purpose of heating people's houses is really only about a third of the current demand for natural gas. The rest of it, as you can see from this chart, is for new things, industrial uses, generating electric power. Phil Rinaldi talked about CHP units that could be put in place, and for commercial. And you can see vehicles are quite small, but we feel that some of those CNG opportunities and LNG opportunities that Craig and others spoke about are only going to increase, and we think increase pretty dramatically. So these modern networks are specifically designed to handle some of these new applications, including combined heat and power, gas fuel cells, as I mentioned, CNG. And having this higher pressure network would allow PGW to expand the customer base and increase volumes that not only would help pay for the upgrade, but also, as I mentioned previously, drive down costs for the community. So every industrial revolution is driven by, we feel, an energy revolution. PGW has one of the lowest shares of commercial and industrial customers today among U.S. gas utilities, and we think that if we rethink how we're going to replace the cast iron by thinking about also upgrading the pressure potential within the system, we could not only do something to drive economic development, but also do something for the city's residents.
Just to interrupt you, I think that's partly our fault for not insisting that new businesses coming in the city use gas.
I like that idea. And it is interesting today when you look around at who's using electricity. You know, think about that bakery that Councilman Jones was talking about earlier. You know, there are a lot of businesses today that simply can't operate in the modern economy if they have to run on electricity. And certainly, if we could increase not only the price, it's really the availability of gas today that's the problem. And that's why we think that in addition to replacing the cast iron for safety purposes, we would recommend looking at improving or increasing the pressure that can be handled in the system to permit a larger volume of gas to get into the city. So in addition to cast iron, though, there's also another issue, which is that PGW has about 500 miles of cathodically non-protected steel lines. So these also have to be replaced. And at this point, PGW, we understand, is putting together a plan for replacing these cathodically unprotected steel lines. And they need to be, because like cast iron, they have another safety issue. They can rust in unpredictable locations to a point where they don't perform. Currently, only about 1 mile a year of these steel lines are being replaced. Certainly it's clear that the plan isn't to take a 500-year approach to replacing that part of the network. As I said, we understand the company is putting together plans to replace these mains. But if you put that on top of the cast iron program, you start talking about a time frame where the process of replacing these is simply not acceptable in terms of time frame. We've looked at other programs at other utilities in the country. Dominion East Ohio, Columbia Gas of Ohio, both have programs that they describe as 25-year programs to replace their mains. Columbia Gas of Ohio actually exceeded that in 2012. Their programs are considered to represent best practice. Bay State Gas and Niagara Mohawk are also conducting accelerated replacement programs. Boston Gas has recently said they're going to increase their rate of replacement of cast iron and non-cathodically protected steel from 150 miles per year in 2013 to 190 miles per year beginning in 2016. Basically, the message here is that Philadelphia needs a similar kind of program to keep pace with these other cities and these other regions. We continue under the existing constraints, that is, relying exclusively on debt financing and an incremental approach. We'll spend about $45 million a year replacing pipe. We won't finish it for 70 years. And when we're done, the network will end up within 70 years, after all that time and investment, still won't be able to support modern applications and businesses. That's why we have to rethink the cast iron program through the frame of economic development and being able to increase the amount of gas we deliver to new and existing customers. So we feel an alternative approach to this would be to design a modern energy delivery platform capable of providing gas to these new applications and execute it within a 25-year time frame. And do this on an integrated basis with an upgrade of the lateral transportation pipelines that are essential to support growth in the city. Then the project's not simply driven by liability management, but it's an exciting, well-engineered, and thought-through multi-billion-dollar investment program that, in addition to the jobs associated directly with the program, could create a lot of jobs for the businesses that could make use of that cheap and more readily available energy. We're very confident that PGW's experienced engineering and planning groups would be a leader in this effort. Is there really another program of the same magnitude, public or private, that's currently available to the city that could have this kind of multiplier effect? We really feel that this is a big opportunity that we need to take advantage of and look at building a consensus among the various stakeholders to try and do it right away. So a public-private partnership is how we think the city could remove some of these constraints that are currently the underlying causes of this, the basic requirement to have this incremental approach, namely financial and organizational constraints. We think that this new programmatic approach under a public-private partnership would allow the city to deploy the best technologies, practices, reduce the cost of investment, and create attractive and sustainable jobs. One of the truisms that we're basing our analysis on is that $1 billion infrastructure investment would create about 18,000 jobs. And for every dollar that you spend on these sorts of infrastructure investments, you get about $1.44 plowed back into the economy. So there's a real multiplier effect to this sort of investment. So I wanted to spend a couple moments on the Concentric report and deal with some of the concerns that they raised about an outright sale, and how a P3 would do a better job of addressing some of these concerns that Concentric brought up, how it would mitigate them. So the first concern had to do with employees, specifically related to the collective bargaining agreement and retaining employees. Well, certainly if we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar transition from a 70-year program to 25 years, replacing the cast iron, on top of that replacing the non-cathodically protected steel, and converting the system from low pressure to medium or high pressure, we're certainly not worried about being able to maintain the employment that's currently involved at PGW. And obviously it was always part of, and clearly as the mayor said earlier, inside of a P3, if it was done under a lease, it can be done in a bespoke way that would clearly protect the collective bargaining agreement. Certainly rate-related commitments, including social programs, in the same way that we heard the mayor this morning talking about how they wrote into their lease arrangement protections for things that were important to them. One of the nice things about a P3 is that it gives you the opportunity to create a bespoke program that is sensitive to the things that matter to the city, and give the city an opportunity to retain their voice on the things that they feel they have to, while at the same time permitting private capital initiative to come in to the areas of the program where perhaps they would offer something new that would allow us to expedite this. Economic and growth-related questions are raised by Concentric. An economic opportunity plan, a commitment on headquarters and a local presence. Well, at least maybe as a plug for Liberty, we're a locally based group representing local investors. We haven't gone anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be here, and we hope we're going to be a part of what you choose to do in proceeding. Clearly, local government oversight is a somewhat obvious one. And then the last point from Concentric was to think of a way to accelerate the cast iron program. That's really what we've been talking about. So in summary on public-private partnerships, as it relates to the upgrading the distribution network, this third bottleneck of the current infrastructure, we feel that it could implement a best practice accelerated replacement program, modernize the system in 25 years. It would require an additional $90 to $100 million a year of funding. Private investors are ready to provide that funding. And at the same time, if done under a P3, provide that funding in a way that's coordinated with the city and with the community so their voices are heard in creating an optimal investment schedule and design of the program. The additional capital spending would be partially recovered through higher sales volumes and savings on operational and maintenance expenses due to reduced leakage and repair. These potential savings shouldn't be underestimated. Atlanta Gas and Light, through its integrated program, cut pipe replacement costs by 40%, and its annual gas leak repair costs have declined by 80% as they've implemented their program. And they embarked on a 15-year program to replace 2,700 miles of pipeline, a program that included extension of the network to serve new customers, and again, integrated into the replacement program a thought around how to create economic opportunities to spur growth. A public-private partnership would also allow Philadelphia to attract much-needed capital and expertise for system improvement, while preserving the city's right to participate in overseeing PGW's important social programs. There are different ways you could structure the P3 to meet the city's goals. Liberty is ready to engage with the city to assist in designing a P3 framework to finance a network modernization program. It would also allow the city to significantly reduce, to receive a significant upfront payment to reduce the pension deficit, which would equal or exceed the net proceeds of an outright sale and potentially allow the city to continue to receive its annual dividend. The point here is that if we're going to structure a lease like the mayor was describing earlier today, their focus was around maximizing this upfront payment. That would have to be something that the city would determine that they wanted to do. What we're saying is that under with the analysis that we've conducted, we actually think that even while preserving the city's prerogatives related to social programs and protecting labor, we think that the kind of cast iron program we're talking about, this shift to a higher pressure network that would allow then more customers to come into the system, we think that could permit a larger upfront payment to the city than even it would have gotten under an outright sale while retaining ownership of the asset. And clearly the goal of the P3 would be to assure a continued protection of consumers, vulnerable customers, and through economic development increase rather than reduce the number of critical employees and jobs. So this P3 platform is suitable not only for the gas distribution business, so just real briefly, and I know you've been here a long time, I wanted to talk about how a P3 could be also connected to the LNG business. LNG market's very promising economically and environmentally, and it is largely untapped thus far in Philadelphia. Certainly the leader thus far has been the work that Craig and his team has done to use that excess LNG capacity at Port Richmond. Liberty Energy is currently working with a consortium of local, national, and international partners to develop Delaware Valley as a leader in LNG infrastructure. We're seeking to expand the LNG Marcellus liquefaction platform in a Philadelphia port with the objective to develop liquefaction and a multinodal hub. The project is meant to lay the groundwork for Philadelphia to serve as a provider of marine LNG as a marine fuel, complementary to existing port operations. We're also planning to expand the market for Philadelphia LNG by delivering to customers in ISO containers. These are just a few examples of how LNG can act as a catalyst for economic development in the Philadelphia region. And if only a 10% share of the target market were to be achieved, annual economic savings could be more than $200 million. The project brings public and private participants from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware in order to facilitate LNG development with marine bunkering and fleet vehicle fueling as a critical first step. Our proximity to Marcellus and Utica shale and their abundant reserves of gas and natural gas byproducts, coupled with the navigable shipping channel of the Delaware River, ready access to road and rail commerce, allow for an ideal scenario for innovative energy projects to emerge. But it's important to act now. We want Philadelphia to take a leadership position in modernizing energy infrastructure, pursuing economic growth opportunities with natural gas. We owe Philadelphia customers the delivery of a low-cost, reliable, and safe energy product. And as we said earlier, Philadelphia is uniquely positioned. We don't have a monopoly in the opportunities arising from Marcellus, and it's clear that others recognize Marcellus's potential, and there's a rapid acceleration of investment and development around the region. Philadelphia should take its spot as a leader in this. We strongly believe that Philadelphia can add value to this gas and do it in a socially and environmentally sustainable way. Liberty would like to join in the effort to unite the community with capital, labor, entrepreneurial initiative experience, and with PGW. We feel the best way to do this is unite stakeholders under a public-private partnership. And thank you very much once again for being patient with us and listening to our ideas.
Being patient with us. You have a question?
Yes.
You're going to testify, Boris?
Just
No.
Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for your help today. And thanks for your patience. You were talking about the different programs that we have here in the city. Every year something comes up different. Under a public-private partnership under the P3, say we came up with a new program. Would that be something that you could come up and talk? I mean, is that something we could do? Because every year we see a different program come up and different changes in our economy and stuff like that. How would that address if something came up that we thought we needed to address? Have you seen anything like that in the past? I mean, you've been part of these.
Well, I think that the way I would answer it, and you know, jump in and interrupt me if I'm off on the wrong path here, but if I listened earlier today to the mayor, and he talked about the lease having a mechanism in it where they had to go back and inform City Council in Allentown, and then they had a voice in discussing the CapEx program. I think an analogy for how I could see that working here would be that, and clearly part and parcel of what we're describing here is creating sort of islands inside the network where you can have high pressure. So, for example, two examples of this would be if you look at, Center City, Avenue of the Arts. On one end you've got the Museum of Art that today, has relatively high energy costs because they don't have access to gas. On the other end, across Broad, you've got the Convention Center. They're running on 2 diesel generators. You could create an island there, and if council said, we want Avenue of the Arts to have gas, that's a place we'd like to prioritize some of the early CapEx in upgrading the network to make that a place where you could have high pressure. Equally, someone could say, we have all this sort of brownfield development opportunity down on the riverbank. What we'd like to see is the CapEx program to focus on, and this could be the new one, right? So this could be, down the road as the P3 is coming back and informing council of what it's up to, and clearly council would have, and the city would have a voice anyway as a partner in the project. If the new idea was to create an area of high pressure that would be able to deliver lots of gas to a segment of these sort of brownfield sites on the river, then that could be a change, a new initiative that then would get integrated in the CapEx budget, the public-private partnership, and basically put forward as a priority for the next round of CapEx. It was going to upgrading the system.
So a lot of things that we heard today about capacity, you can put these high pressure and increase the capacity along the route is what you're...
Correct.
Okay.
And that's exactly what
There's
we're
chokes that
talking
everybody's
about.
been talking
Right.
about. This releases those chokes.
Right, we are talking about an integrated approach. Exactly right.
Okay.
And that's why we talk about 3 bottlenecks. We talk about transportation, lateral pipelines, but the most important from a city council point of view is obviously last mile that takes it to the customer, right? Because primary responsibility of the council, primary responsibility of the PGW is customer, Philadelphian customer. So addressing this last mile bottleneck is important, and approach, to your point, how to think about programs. The program of cast iron replacement, all in, one way or the other, is about $3.5 billion. It's a sizable investment that city is going to make one way or another way. Question is, if you're going to spend $3.5 billion, and if you believe that it's a worthwhile program, do we need to wait 88 years to see the results of this, or do we want to do it sooner, think through this program, and really mobilize all the resources and execute on this program, bringing private and public efforts together?
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just quick questions here. Hopefully the answers are quick, but 3. 1, you talk about pressure, all right, and the gas pressure that we have here existing in the city of Philadelphia. I think you said it was low pressure, and in order to get in order to get moderate to high pressure gas, throughout the city, how would you do that? What is your economic plan, economic development plan on delivering mid to high pressure to the end users, and how would that be accomplished? Because I'm intrigued by your pipe replacement without digging up our rights of way.
Most of such replacements are done with a step up in pressure. I mean, we talk a little bit about Chicago. In Chicago, the pressure in pipes has been increased by a factor of 100 or 1,000 times. That's a sizable change in throughput. That allows to change the diameter, and frankly, that also allows to change sensoring and monitoring and observation of the network. Because then if you have any breaks, if you have any leakage, you can see changes in pressure. So it's a different modern energy delivery platform. It does require comprehensive analysis. In all other cities, you also have to fulfill requirements of Public Utility Commission and take all the gas meters outside of the houses, outside of the homes, and bring them on the streets. In all of the cities, it has been done. Really, one of the most impressive efforts was done in Atlanta. Similar efforts are happening in Boston, Washington, across the nation. And I think as Philadelphia, we can really take advantage of this. And I will follow up on your question regarding economics, because if we take into account only safety, if we swap in one pipeline for another pipeline, I mean, obviously, new pipeline, 88 years down the road, will become an old pipeline. So we can start over. And second, obviously, this new pipeline does not really change the economics. If you can move to higher pressure pipes, if you can increase deliverability by a factor of 10 or 100, you can serve more customers. You have more volumes. The same tariff will be applied for a bigger base, and that creates opportunities for combined heat and power. That creates opportunities for CNG. I mean, let's ask, why do we have only one CNG station in Philadelphia? Frankly, because we don't have high pressure gas for this. I mean, there are multiple reasons, obviously, but that's one underlying underlying issue. So this plan does allow to implement best engineering solutions, and it also allows to create additional economics for this. Think about this, not only residential customers pay for an upgrade, but also commercial and industrial customers pay for an upgrade and take the benefits of this upgrade. So this desire to bring residential customers, citizens, and businesses together, not only to consume but also finance a build, that feels like a private-public partnership.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. So I just want to make sure I understand. So there's a cast iron pipe. You're not replacing the pipe. You're inserting a high-pressure pipeline into the existing pipe?
In a general case, yes. In some cases, it still has to be replaced, but in most of the cases, yes. It
So
could
that-
be sleeve.
That would reduce the cost of the change, or is that less important than the fact that you've increased the capacity through a more technologically advanced delivery system?
I think that's where you've got it right, which is the idea is that the engineering plan would approach it from the perspective of we need to create a modern network that could support all these economic development opportunities, CHP, CNG, et cetera. And then you get down to a much more sort of granular level of, in this particular street, the pipe's in okay shape. This one we can do by running a plastic high-pressure pipe inside of the existing pipe. Another location, the analysis might prove that the pipe is not really something you want to still have sticking around under the streets, and you have to rip that one out. So it's not like one could guarantee that it would be consistently the same everywhere, but it would certainly presents an opportunity to, over a material portion of the replacement project, to do it in this way, which is simply sleeving the new pipe inside the old.
So when the pressure's increased 100, 1,000 times, there's the delivery of the gas, and the existing equipment in the homes and the businesses can handle that increased pressure?
You will have additional valves that would be built in. You will have step down and pressure, same as an electric network. So you move from high voltage to medium voltage to low voltage at home.
Okay, just real quick. So I like the idea, but let me just ask you. So if I own a home and there's a new high-pressure system coming in, how do I get the high-pressure gas into my house? Do I need to hire someone to make some adjustments? Is that done in the street? How does that?
It will be done by PGW, so they will handle it all the way to the customer. So you will not have to do anything specific. But in this case, let's say, for example, if it's your home, and for example, you can have also an opportunity to refill your CNG car at home. That would be a possibility. You would be able to run small cogen unit at your home. That would be, as Craig said, twice more efficient. So you have additional applications, or you might switch to a gas-fueled fuel cell. So you'll have more efficient applications, more modern applications that this network would be able to support, but it would be the same way handled by PGW. And we want to be clear too, we are not really trying to teach PGW how to do the business. They know engineering, they have best engineers on staff, they know the network. What we want to be sure that we're helping them to unlock financing opportunities, opportunities based on programmatic approach, opportunities based to take advantage of best practices. Because it's a big step up, that's why we call it a private-public partnership. Step up which is also comprehensive. In some cases, in most of the cases, we would want to coordinate this effort with Comcast, with water utilities. If you're doing such major energy delivery platform upgrade, you want perhaps upgrade some other networks, because that would be efficient way to proceed with the city. And that's why you cannot do it just on the private side of the business. It does require extensive permitting, it does require extensive regulatory involvement, and you want to address a lot of utilities when you're doing this approach.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I must announce that I've been told by our chief clerk that we have to be out of here by 5 o'clock. So I think I have a couple more people, and then we have some public testimony. So we will ask that you, we're not here today to make any decision. Today is to gather information. And certainly we will not adjourn, we will recess, because we may need to come back, and I'm sure we need to come back, because there are a lot of questions that have to be asked. I just have one right quick. What is your inclusion strategy for MBE, WEB, DEB enterprises? Do you have any of these enterprises as part of your P3 team? What is your minority participation?
You know, when we put together the original investment consortium that participated in the prior process, we put together on the investor side certainly a very, very diverse group of local investors. And what has interested us so far has been that for a lot of those folks, the attractiveness of the project always wasn't just because it could generate a good return, but also because it looked like to them an exciting way to do something they thought would generate economic development in the city. So if you were to look at that group of investors that we had put together previously, it does reflect and look like the people in our community. In terms of partners, we have a long-standing relationship with Chariot, who's going to testify subsequently. And to be honest, we have always assumed that in terms of moving from, we'd like to offer suggestions for you then to tell us what you intend to do. Certainly we already have had lots of conversations with various local suppliers, contractors, players, investors, et cetera, who again include participants in our consortium that certainly would meet any good standard and the kind of standards that you demand for diversity and for minority participation. We can provide you, with some of these names of the folks that were involved originally in our project and have told us that they're willing to continue with us. But to be frank, until we know what you want to do, we're a little bit reluctant to say exactly who we're going to be working with, only because we're not certain what the project is we're working on. So that's kind of maybe a somewhat, a funny answer, but the answer I hope is that, in the same way that we were committed to maintaining and achieving the highest standards on that in the bid we put together in the prior process, it would be the same if you decided to initiate a new one.
So we have a staff of 2 right now?
Can I follow up?
Okay.
If I can follow up, no matter which way we go, it looks like there's some infrastructure, no matter what direction we go. And City Council has a long history to make certain that we use local contractors. And we have, as part of the procurement process, we make certain that our minority businesses are well represented within. Isn't that something we would put in the partnership agreement so that you would have to adhere to on an annual basis? I mean, like come back and report and say, hey, look, we did $1 million of work this year. We've given X, Y, Z. I mean, because that's moving forward. There's a lot of jobs that come out of there, and we want to make sure that those jobs are do look like our city. And if if that happens, but that's something we would put in the partnership agreement, correct?
It's somewhat already even in a partnership agreement, in our partnership agreement, because one of our investors is Union Life Labor Insurance Company. They have very similar high standards requirements related to diversity, related to involvement of labor union and unionized labor in this effort. So to some extent, we already have some of these elements built in the partnership, but as Charlie's saying, we'll be looking for dialogue.
We look for a little more here at City Council. We want to make certain that,
Yeah, I think, Councilman, you're absolutely right. This is exactly a place where, again, you get to decide because you have a seat at the table in creating the public-private partnership. And, even if you want to tweak, the standards that you want to see applied in this particular program, you do it by putting it into the lease agreement.
right inside the lease agreement. Thank you very much.
Councilman.
And for the record, for any interested party, and certainly everybody here today is extremely credible and has the experience of putting together a great team, or you wouldn't be here today. Some you'll see will be 100% minority owned and business enterprise, but we as a city take it very serious, and any plan moving forward in any type of public-private partnership or arrangement, will have a very lofty goal to reflect the city of Philadelphia and the opportunities that we deserve, as we deliver a high-quality service to the end users. So, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Maybe just one last comment related, because we talk a lot today about LNG, and we discussed what would be the most exciting opportunity related to LNG in this room, and I wanted really briefly, in a few sentences, to share our vision, because obviously LNG gas from the United States going in Asia, going in Europe, going in Latin America, and frankly replacing oil or replacing LNG indexed oil in a lot of these places. But the most exciting opportunity is frankly at home, because the biggest consumer in the world is United States of oil. So we consume the most of the oil in the world. And oil is the biggest polluter in the United States. So we have a unique opportunity to kill the two birds with one stone in this case. We don't want to exclude the strategy to catch up with 37 other terminals that are underway to ship U.S. gas overseas, but we can continue to build on the leadership when we are bringing LNG gas for U.S. applications, U.S. transportation, marine, rail, all other stuff, because frankly, this is the biggest market. It is our competitive advantage. PGW uniquely positioned to do it, and we should be building on this competitive advantage and advancing it to neighboring regions.
And I think you make a great point on the way out, not just exports, but domestic use and reuse. And the petrochemical industry has been a critical and vital employment and opportunities for people to work here, and it's been an economic engine, for our region, and we want to continue to support their capital improvement in delivering the products that they do safely and with the highly trained workforce that they have. And I want to let everybody know as well, we as a city are ready to train people and put people to work. So whatever opportunities we can do to enhance that and prepare for what is in front of us, we're ready to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, have all of the public-private partnership groups spoken yet? All right, come on up. Please, I'm sorry. I have the name here. Is this?
3 minutes. How about 3 minutes, please, guys? Please.
Mr. Vasquez? Yes. Okay, I'm sorry.
Let me start by thanking you for the invitation.
Thank you for coming and thanking you for being patient. And we hope that you can sort of like summarize, because this is not the only discussion.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we're not here to make any decisions today about
I'm happy
anything.
to return. I flew up yesterday from Puerto Rico, and I'll fly back anytime you want me. So my company specializes in the energy area. Our specialty is in program management, valuation, and funding advisory services. Just a little background on myself. I've spent about a third of my career in the government sector. I started out in strategic planning for the largest utility in the United States many years ago. I worked in worldwide strategic planning for probably the #1 oil and gas company in the world. Later in my career, I ended up as a senior managing director, which is a partner level at Bear Stearns. I've probably been the lead banker in many billions of dollars of energy financings and been part of the senior management team in multiples of that. In my career, I've been the lead advisor in many projects. Many years ago, I did some things down here in Chester with the shipyard with Sun Oil Company, or Helios, which is owned by Shell. But I was the advisor in an LNG terminal. I was the lead advisor in a 500 megawatt gas-fired combined cycle plant, 500 megawatt, 450 megawatt coal-fired plant. And I had the opportunity to develop some ideas that I have come across in my P3 experience. And I proposed, developed, and 100% financed a telecom company with the utility in Puerto Rico. And what was interesting about that was that my concept and my proposal to them was, in many of these initiatives, you have intrinsic and intangible values that are worth a lot of money. And they allowed me in a non-for-profit to put together a telecom company without a dime of equity, without any guarantees from them. We financed it totally with debt. We hired all the contractors. We built it. We put it together. That company is worth many hundreds of millions of dollars today. It's expanded throughout the United States. It's through Europe, through part of the Middle East, and it will be worth a lot more money in the future. The underlying concept is, on a lot of these P3s, you know, we tend, in evaluation basis, to look at what is the most obvious thing. The most obvious thing is how much cash flow does the company generate, and what are the possibilities, and what are the synergisms that you get from that. But there are other values which very often tend to be overlooked. I couldn't help this morning. It's the first time I met your CEO, but I've looked at PGW. And, you know, you have a management team. I think he had 30 years of experience. You have an infrastructure. You have a whole set of values there that you don't get when you sell a company like that. You don't get the value for that. What you get the value for is from the cash flow and what's projected within their own framework. I am proposing to you that before you do P3s, because P3s or privatizations are going to be important for you to optimize the value of PGW, but before you do that, you pre-position PGW in a very careful transition to a for-profit entity, and you use, or entities, may end up being more than one entity because you have different profit centers in there, and that you use as a basis for what you're doing is the public market in an IPO. For instance, if you were to go out and do a 20% IPO for whatever, after you've done, you know, your strategic planning on this, you then get to negotiate with the P3 counterparty or your joint venture by separating management, technology, and capital. If you sit down at the table and you're the one without the capital, and your counterparty has all the capital, you start off at a dramatic disadvantage. In the structure that I'm proposing, look at the alternatives that you have. let's suppose that you did, and let's suppose just for the moment that it's an integrated entity, one entity, and you sold 20% in the public market. You get to hold the other 80% and hold that as an asset. You get to issue the remaining 80% in the public market, or you get to sit down with your P3 counterpart and negotiate a merger or a joint venture or whatever else you want to put together. You have now done two really important things. One is you've converted this entity into a securitization that you, when I say you, I mean the city of Philadelphia, gets to manage the securities, but you have freed up your experts here to go and get the most value for this company. For instance, I'm not as good as your CEO in the diplomacy of words, but one of the things he was suggesting, there's many opportunities here, but I'm working inside a government structure that has all of this time delays and RFP requirements and blah, 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 et cetera. But you know what? In a public company, now he would have different pressures. In a public company, he would be able to make decisions, and he's your expert, right? And his team are your experts. They'd be able to make decisions a lot more quickly. Let me just do a couple of numeric exercises here. I think you have my paper. I listed a number of companies in the downstream gas market, downstream, what do you call it, regulated gas market. And what you see is that most of them have a price-earnings ratio somewhere in the 20s. Which is, by the way, the buyer, the potential buyer of your entity, UIL Holdings, has a PE ratio of 21. A lot of these companies do more than just gas, but they're in the regulated industry. If usually a company like PGW would be valued based on its cash flow, not based on a PE. But just to, if you forgive me for a moment, to make the jump on that, we were talking this morning about $50–60 million bottom line. Your management and the Concentric report was suggesting that, you know, there are a number of straightforward initiatives to generate another 30. So you're talking about a company with a potential of maybe $90 million, PE ratio of 20/21, $1.8 billion makes sense for a local distribution company operating in the downstream gas market. But now, let's take a step back and take a look at the midstream market. The midstream market has midstream, meaning liquefaction and pipeline distribution, et cetera, have PE ratios of between 74 and 111. That's from an NYU database. They had 85 companies. I took a quick look at them. They're all in that kind of midstream. 3 to 5 times the value of the local distribution company. There's clearly opportunities here, and there's challenges. I mean, it's clear that on the liquefaction side, you have aging, you have logistics problems, you have all kinds of problems. What I'm suggesting is, as a venue, that you think seriously about creating. There's many venues that could be used with this model, but I'm suggesting you think seriously about creating a trust or a fund, very similar to what New York State did in the Public Asset Fund, which I happen to have been one of the 5 members on the board, unstaffed, by the way. And what their responsibility was to convert non-for-profits into for-profit entities. And on the first assignment, New York State expected to earn something like $500 million. It was Empire Health. And when I left, now I wasn't there for the whole thing, but I was there for a number of years. And when I left, the asset value was $5 billion, okay, through a series of moves similar to what I've put here. What I'm suggesting is that you think seriously about this fund, and it begins freeing him up. It puts a lot of pressure on him, too. Remember, when you trade in the public market, suddenly you get effectively a step up in, I'll use the word value of your entity. Why? because it's now liquid, okay? If you have a private company over here, it's not that easy to sell it. It's not that easy to deal with it. But you get a step up because of liquidity. You get a second step because of your access to the market. But in a public entity, you have disclosure, and you have some other benefits in the implementation of this that you could really add significant additional value at the underwriting stage of this thing. So I'm not saying you would do that. What I'm saying is that I'm a big believer in processes, and I'm a big believer in clarity. I think you start off with a clear set of objectives. You identify all of your stakeholders involved in this, and then you perform a situation analysis, and you make sure in that situation analysis that you look at the profit centers jointly and separately, so you get an idea of whether this company is worth more as an integrated unit or if it's worth more broken up. And you include in that assessment a situation analysis, a risk analysis, and a labor analysis, which in everything I've ever done has always been a critical component. That situation analysis leads to a strategic plan and then to implementation, right? So that's kind of it. I was trying to be fast because I know you're running out of time. And I think I've covered the main points.
Let me just say, and we didn't expect it to go this long, and we have a time schedule for our stenographer. This is not the only discussion about this issue. It's very complicated, a lot of pieces to it, and we wanted to get a flavor of what people think a P3 would look like. So we appreciate your coming, and we have your testimony, which we will share with our colleagues. And
I'd be happy to come back anytime. You know, what I've said to my other clients, and they're not all cities, but the equivalent of what I said to all of them, in terms of these initiatives, start thinking of yourself as a nation city, okay? And what's the value of this asset outside the borders of this town? The energy hub, the advantage of the energy hub is regional. It's not specific. You have to decide if you're going to participate. What's the advantage of this hub is that you have almost 20% of the population of the United States within 200 miles of here, and you're right across the Atlantic Ocean from the west coast of Europe. So that's a major advantage. But the other advantage you have is this infrastructure that's built. You are one of the largest public gas distribution companies in the United States, but you're a fairly modest-sized company if you look at the private sector. Why can't, and I'm not making recommendations here, I'm just kind of pointing out some things. Why can't the expertise of this company begin doing what many people have been presenting here today in other cities and other regions of the United States? Why can't this be a major gas distribution? You have the expertise, you have the infrastructure. They can do things throughout the U.S., right? So let's think, forgive me for saying it this way, but let's think about ourselves. We're a city nation, right? Outside these borders, we're going to figure out how to exploit the expertise that we have. So that's it. That's mine.
thank you very much. We do have a great company. We do have great expertise, and we do need to really realize that. Thank you for coming, and certainly we will probably call you back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come anytime.
Thank you.
All right.
I have another company, Chariot, and is Penn Energy here? We did Penn Energy. Okay, I'm sorry to. Don't let him get away.
Good evening. We'll try to be as fast as possible.
Please.
Since we're on the clock. My name is John Henry. I'm the chairman, founder, and CEO of the Chariot Companies. I have with me to my right Dr. Cecilia Cardesa-Lusardi. She's our chief strategy officer. Before I get into the testimony, and I kind of wanted to summarize, since we're last, what we've heard today. We've heard from a lot of smart folks, and the city of Philadelphia very blessed and in an enviable situation. You have a whole lot of sophisticated people with deep pockets chasing after you, talking about P3s, public-private partnerships. But the one thing in a public-private partnership, in our view, is process, people, and place. And one thing that no one's talked about today is people. People's driving all these decisions. The why we're here is the people. The Lazard report spells it out in 2012. It identified certain social costs. The Concentric report does the same thing. All these people today have talked about the technical stuff, and all that stuff is great. We can talk about it too, we got money too, but I want to focus on the people. Because if everyone that testified before me put the effort into solving the social costs of the city of Philadelphia, they would be done. The solutions would be there. I'm a very small company, very lean staff. We put together a model that the city of Philadelphia can utilize to solve the problems. Instead of looking at it as a transaction and economics first, solve the social last, we switched the game up. We said, here's a certain set of conditions in the city of Philadelphia. We need to solve these problems. And to the extent we can solve these problems, there's going to be benefits to PGW. Solve the social costs first. So I ask you before I get into my written speech, ask where's the beef? We're different from everybody else. We have all that technical stuff, but we actually have solutions around the people. And at the end of the day, that's what all this stuff, this testimony, these hearings, that's what it's about. All right, thank you. Now I'm going to restart my written testimony. It is very rare in this life to work with not one, but a few of your heroes. Ernie Green is one of my heroes. On September 25th, 1957, Ernie Green was the sole senior among a group of courageous children, the Little Rock Nine, who risked his life to attend Central High School. Now, I'd have to imagine that when a young Ernie Green woke up that morning in 1957 and made his way to Central High, confronted by hostile crowds and escorted by the screaming eagles of the 101st Airborne, heroics were not on his mind. So you see, this conflict wasn't a clash of armies, but it was rather a clash of wills, a contest to determine that which lies at the core of America. The 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision eliminated racial discrimination in public schools, but Ernie's courage tested the strength of that decision. No matter how much doubt, fear, or anticipation was in the air, nothing was going to prevent him from gaining equal access to opportunities, not even enduring daily harassment and violence. And because of people like Ernie Green, the principle of a just and fair America and an inclusive America, that ideal ultimately triumphed. His actions not only mobilized Americans to ensuring that access to quality education was granted to all, but they helped define the civil rights movement. Ernie's decision in 1957 led African Americans and other civil rights leaders on a mission to change America. Ernie's legacy and work continues today by serving on my board of directors of the Chariot Companies, and I'm very proud of that. He embodies the spirit that the plain and humble people, the forgotten, the downtrodden and overlooked, we can shape history. He's living proof. Members of the Energy Committee, I invite you to channel that sort of humble and plain spirit today. Become history makers, like Ernie. Define the Philadelphia Energy Hub movement by reshaping the socioeconomic landscape of Philadelphia for generations to come. City Council must ensure that our youth, especially children of color, are equipped with the knowledge and skills they need to become future leaders and participate in Philadelphia's emerging new energy economy. A movement is indeed afoot in Philadelphia. Forged in the crucible of social equality and economic opportunity, Chariot stands on the shoulders of giants like Ernie and others by seeking to transform Philadelphia Gasworks through a P3. Anticipating the Philadelphia Energy Hub, we began our journey in 2011, seeking to address Philadelphia's systemic challenges generally, and more particularly those facing PGW. The new PGW P3 if in the hands of the right visionaries, can indeed make Philadelphia a job juggernaut. I believe that Chariot is the right visionary. And here's why. Companies have often overlooked opportunities to meet societal needs and misunderstood how societal harms and weaknesses affect value chains. The field of vision has simply been too narrow. What has been missed is the profound effect that people, place, and process can have on the productivity and innovation. Council members and the special committee, there are places and moments in Philadelphia's history that have shaped America's destiny, but perhaps none greater than the decision you consider today. Whether to support Philadelphia as an energy hub, and to the extent that you do, what P3 opportunities exist with PGW that can maximize operational efficiencies, generate new revenues, provide strategic visioning for an energy hub, and importantly, bake in economic and social benefits to all Philadelphians. With such an effort, we can make sure our new energy economic system serves all and not just some. Together, we can raise a level of economic prosperity in the region for all Philadelphians. Together, we can address unfair and oftentimes unequal workforce opportunities through Chariot Labs and STEAM-based education. And for the record, we've submitted that energy action plan, and Dr. Lusardi will be discussing that here momentarily. Together, we can reduce poverty rates in Philadelphia and demolish barriers to opportunity by making sure that every Philadelphian willing to work in this new energy economy has access to pathways for targeted energy industry education, workforce development, life skills training, and wraparound services. These pathways lead to careers, generous wages, and sturdier rungs on the ladder into the middle class. There are many opportunities both to leverage a PGW P3 to use the natural resources and infrastructure of Philadelphia to create an economic vehicle that will impact all sectors of the Philadelphia economy and social fabric. A true energy hub creates value by connecting things in ways that make them worth more than the sum of their parts. In our P3 effort, each party brings different skills and resources to bear, and they're more powerful than any program that either party by themselves individually could come up and develop. Our shared value creation model powers change, not just at the level of an organization or an industry, but we go through the whole value chain and diverse ecosystems. We dig deep and go far. There are 5 conditions of collective impact that must guide any potential P3. Common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and backbone support. A Chariot P3 could deliver avenues for creating shared value that are mutually reinforcing. For example, building a world-scale LNG expansion project at the port terminal and promoting fully developed and integrated downstream supply chains to monetize dry gas through storage, commercial sales, and other outlets. PGW can expand its liquefaction capacity. Opportunities like this, the leasing or the potential P3 of LNG, or the sale of LNG, involve competitive markets. And execution risks are very different than, I believe, the ones that PGW are currently comfortable with taking. And consequently, Chariot brings the capital and marketing competencies to a P3 and is willing to assume these risks. The potential to lower the cost of gas to PGW customers could result in lower customer gas bills, especially for those struggling to pay their bills. PGW will benefit from lower customer responsibility program costs and a reduction in bad debt expense through our utility trust fund. For example, PGW has 70,000 low-income residential customers enrolled in the CRP and nearly 23,000 customers in its senior citizens discount program at an annual cost of $80 million. These same program participants must use, a Chariot P3 will ensure that the PGW efforts to reduce CRP customers' usage, since their bills are based on their income level rather than on the amount of natural gas they use, we are uniquely qualified and possess the expertise to design and implement programs that target these qualifying customers. For example, $80 million. If we saved 20%, that's $16 million a year in savings to the CRP program. That essentially equates to about 9 or 10 miles of additional pipeline replacement each year. How do we do that? We introduced actually I just met yesterday with Governor Wolf's staff about this. I met with them about the Utility Trust Fund and a host of other things. But how you do it is you have to expand LIHEAP. Right now, the 70,000 people that are participating in CRP, they have to apply for LIHEAP, but we have to dig deeper. There's no LIHEAP money there. Pennsylvania's allocation of LIHEAP is $16 million from the feds. It's a block grant. The average allocation cash emergency assistance grant per DHS is about $230 per family. That's about 70,000 families right now. If you look at the numbers, I mean, PGW, my understanding, has about 150,000 customers, of which about 100,000 are in these programs, the CRP. So one, there's an opportunity. We're missing 50,000 people that are falling through the cracks somewhere. Secondly, to the extent that they're in these programs, the CRP programs and the like, we need to have a utility trust fund, because right now, rate-paying customers are subsidizing the low-wealth communities. And that's a big number, a very big number. It's achievable. We're doing it at scale. It saves money. It helps build up the middle class. These are all things that Philadelphians need. I'm going to switch up now to describe and talk about a little bit about who we are. We testified back in November. We've been at this for a long time here in Philadelphia. I was raised in Mount Airy. All my family's from Philadelphia. So passion's a currency of creation. The energy that comes with diverse stakeholders collaborating to address specific community issues can be a powerful force for change. That's why we advocate with so much passion and conviction, because we know our efforts matter. Time's of the essence. Chariot's managed by a seasoned team of energy, infrastructure, and real estate investment professionals who average more than 30 years of experience in each discipline. We bring a wealth of diverse, world-class experience, insight, and agility, entrepreneurial spirit, and shared value creation to any PGW P3. To follow are a few highlights of our team. We have the first African-American chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission on our team. And these are all of our board members. Former executive deputy of the New York State Public Service Commission, one of the 75 most powerful blacks on Wall Street from Black Enterprise magazine, executive committee of the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honor ever given to a U.S. citizen, White House Task Force on Minority Business Enterprises, presidential appointment as Assistant Secretary of Labor under Carter, presidential appointment as Assistant Secretary of Education under Clinton, presidential appointment as Associate Director of Outreach for White House Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, G.W. Bush. We have reach, but the reach that we have is not just energy reach, it's educational reach, it's labor and employment reach. These people led our nation. These are on our team. That's why we distinguish ourselves from everyone else that went before us today, because we have the social community, the people component that no one else can deliver, in my humble opinion. Now I want to transition to Dr. Ceci Lusardi, Cherry's Chief Strategy Officer. She will share our STEAM-based energy action plan that reconnects working class families to Philadelphia's economic renaissance. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Ceci Cardesa Lusardi. I serve as Chariot's Chief Strategy Officer, and I want to walk you briefly through the Summer Energy Academy, which is a pipeline for workforce development, readiness, and training in Philadelphia's energy
You
hub.
have to speak into the mic. I can't understand a thing.
Can you
you're
hear me
saying.
now?
Yes,
Okay.
a little closer.
Closer?
And could you kind of summarize this? Because I'm trying to figure out, how does the social part fit in with and how do you make that work for PGW? We have the testimony here.
Okay.
Okay, so how does all this come together to help the financial condition of PGW?
There are a host of reasons. In the context of a PG3, we believe that we're the only entity that really has the best interests of Philadelphians from a private sector perspective because we're a certified community development entity, and that's by definition what we do. That's why we created the Utility Trust Fund. I modeled it after a housing trust fund. We needed that innovation. How does it translate? Basically, it translates through a contractual arrangement. Like I said earlier, everyone here that has testified has the requisite skill set. In fact, Councilman Heenan even suggested it. Everyone here has the threshold limit or test, it met the standard to have this discussion with you and potentially participate in this transaction. From our standpoint, the social costs are very important. The Utility Trust Fund, creating jobs, energizing the community through education and STEAM-based education. Ceci can talk about some statistics now through STEAM, but frankly, there is a dearth of qualified there's a dearth of qualified candidates, frankly, as identified by the American Petroleum Institute and other trade groups, based on a host of issues, one of which is the educational problems incidental to our country, but more importantly, the aging demographic, the aging populations, there are a whole lot of challenges. In fact, Ceci can get into that right now.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about job creation and what that'll mean, but for us as a minority-owned organization from a Latino perspective, we're saying, well, how are we going to fulfill those jobs? Where are they coming from? And are we ready? And it's a self-audit to look at our energy hub in light of STEM, STEAM-based education, preparing the workforce to supply those jobs. And we feel that through the Summer Energy Academy, through our individual work, again, to John's point, this is not a one-off transaction. It's not what we do. It's about sharing opportunities for community transformation. Whether it is, John has created a pool of history makers, and we are making history ourselves. We come from a human rights perspective, a women's equality perspective, a youth development perspective. How, if we look at the social aspect of it, we want to make of the P3, we want to make sure that not only are we part of a P3 with City Council and making history together, but are we also considering different aspects of the population from a social perspective, from a Latino perspective, African American perspective, gender perspective? Are we going as wide and thoughtfully as we can be? And for us, it's an opportunity to be at that table and represent interests that are only not going to are going to move the needle forward, but we think that the transparency of who Chariot Companies is as an organization brings so much value through our partnerships, through not just what we do, but what we achieve together, whether it is at Stadium Village, providing internship opportunities, working with the Climate Center at Penn through an internship program to evaluate the work that we're doing, working in partnership with the Department of Energy to cultivate what this motto could look like. It's an action plan. And so I go back to, we love Philly, we love being from this area, living here, working here, and we want to walk down the street with the same level of respect when I was teaching GED classes in Kensington, that I can also walk into a Fortune 50 board with that same level of credibility to say, we are representing the whole amalgam of issues related to a PGW, P3, it's been through a long day, PGW P3, my apologies. And that's what we're here to widen and deepen that conversation. I know the city is looking also at people, places, and processes, and we want it to be a Venn diagram, an interconnected conversation, so we can together look at what PGW means, what a P3 could look like, what that impact can have in the community long term, and not forgetting where we come from. There is thoughtfulness, there is intentionality about everything that we do, but there's also a period, an element of bridge building. And we can have this, business acumen and sophistication to look at operations, cost reduction programs, and as, complex a financial operation can be. But at the same time, we can go into the community and talk to children whose parents are incarcerated and they're living with grandparents, and through the Summer Energy Academy, we can talk with them about careers in energy. Sometimes, and I know from my perspective, both as a Latino and an immigrant, we're not as used to math and science, and our role is to say it is not, science can be fun, and look at the real world applications in energy. You don't have to go to Penn or MIT to make $85,000. You can be a pipe fitter. You can be work in the gas industry and provide for your family. And so we work, again, our premise is to make sure that the left hand talks to the right hand. It is time that we not only make history together, but we invite you to consider walking with us far and wide, so that all of the aspects of this beautiful interconnectivity is looked at it with a level of respect it deserves for all involved. We can make a lot of profit, and we can make a lot of good, and that's our proposition to you.
Well, thank you very much. And we certainly have your testimony. And as we are in a discussion, certainly your perspective is worthwhile, and it does reach out to the community. And we have to figure out how all this comes together.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
I look forward to
Enjoy your weekend.
Okay, I hate to rush you. Next time you'll call you first. We have we have some people who want to testify. I think I've done all the panels. We have Mr. Matt Walkers. What?
He'll call him out.
You'll call him?
If you let the clerk
Okay,
call him.
all right, I'm sorry.
Okay, this way you mark them off.
Okay, yes, sir. All right. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Matt Walker, and I'm the Community Outreach Director with Clean Air Council. We're an environmental health organization dedicated to protecting everyone's right to breathe clean air. And we've been working on that mission since 1967. Thanks for letting me speak here today. The Council and its members are seriously concerned about the proposal to transform Philadelphia into a fossil fuel energy hub. The Philadelphia economy is driven by its tourism, medical services, and higher education. It is a progressive city that leads the rest of Pennsylvania. Everyone in this room knows full well that devastating global and local environmental and public health impacts that are associated with the continued use of fossil fuels. Philadelphia today is at a crossroads. Is its future one that promotes fossil fuels, or is it one that embraces the energy and jobs of the 21st century, such as energy efficiency, solar, and public transportation, and others? Hopefully, Philadelphia will choose to be a leader and prioritize public health, safety, and welfare, and the environment. Philadelphians are exposed to chronic elevated levels of air pollution. The region is not in attainment of the federal standards for ozone, smog, and particulates. A fossil fuel energy hub, as is currently being considered, will include expanding refineries, LNG, gas and gas liquids pipelines, and petrochemical manufacturing. Increasing the number of such facilities would reverse the progress the city has made in cleaning up its air by reinvigorating and ramping up many of the same types of pollutant sources as those largely responsible for Philadelphia's history of poor air quality. New or expanded infrastructure, such as the expanding PES and Marcus Hook refineries and others, would significantly increase harmful air pollution in the region. A fossil fuel energy hub would also increase the potential risk to public welfare should an accident occur. Center City residents are already uneasy about the rail cars carrying oil that crisscross the city. 2 derailments in Philadelphia in a year is not reassuring. The proposed fossil fuel hub would hinder the chance our city has to excel in an environmentally sustainable economy that could provide many more good-paying and long-lasting jobs while promoting clean air and water and curbing climate change. It is short-sighted to base Philadelphia's future economy on natural gas and related products. The price of Marcellus shale gas is volatile and is projected to increase. While there are varying opinions about how much gas can be extracted, newer projections about supplies are substantially smaller than initial optimistic estimates. City Council must avoid financially risky business partnerships and should not allow large corporate interests to control Philadelphia's future. It is financially risky for PGW to consider acting as an anchor customer of natural gas so that pipeline companies could build this proposed pipe dream pipeline from Northeast Pennsylvania to Philadelphia and expand additional infrastructure from it. There are a growing number of pipeline explosions and leakages occurring across the country. A private-public partnership to invest in a natural gas pipeline would substantially add to the city's risk, since this infrastructure is inherently dangerous and could result in negative public health and environmental impacts. A private-public partnership would also transfer investment risk from pipeline companies to the city. City Council should be extremely cautious of entering into agreements with limited liability corporations like PES and Liberty Energy Trust, both of which have a limited track record. Clean Air Council rejects the idea that City Council can pursue both the fossil fuel energy hub as well as promote a green economy and continue to strive to be the most sustainable city in America. If council members took action to truly promote Philadelphia's green economy, they would be leading the charge on promoting the expansion of sectors like solar efficiency and public transit. Instead, concrete advancements on these sectors get moved to the bottom of the priority list. With the purpose and agenda of this public hearing today, it appears like City Council has already made up its mind, clearly, about pursuing a fossil fuel energy hub, a decision that will lock Philadelphia into years of pollution and health impacts. It seems like the real purpose of these hearings is to smooth the way for a fossil fuel energy hub. Council members have so far done a poor job of asking for and acting on community input or concerns, and that has got to change. How much effort has City Council put into reaching out to businesses that have a vision for developing Philadelphia as a sustainable energy hub? While companies and elected officials see the present gas glut as an opportunity to make use of the gas and related products, it is short-sighted to base our city's economic future on such a volatile commodity like natural gas. Gas is a non-renewable resource, and projections about the supplies have plummeted from initial estimates. City Council should actively be pursuing a sustainable economy that would provide long-term livable wage jobs and revenue to the city without the negative environmental or economic impacts. The Council is concerned that the fossil fuel energy hub concept will result in mostly short-term jobs that aren't guaranteed for Philadelphia workers, while leaving the city with environmental and economic costs for decades to come. There are easily over 10,000 living wage job opportunities in sectors like expanding public transit, energy efficiency, and renewable energy in the next 10 years. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy completed a study in 2009 that found, with the right policies, energy efficiency and solar could spur the growth of at least 9,000 jobs in Philadelphia by 2025 in installing energy efficiency and solar measures. Based on National Renewable Energy Laboratory data, the Council estimates that in Philadelphia, cost-effective rooftop solar could produce over 20% of the city's electricity needs, provide more than 4,000 well-paid jobs, and increase grid reliability. There are many more jobs in these green sectors than the short-term construction jobs or even the limited amount of long-term jobs being touted at refineries, hundreds and hundreds I heard earlier today. And you don't even have to change the rules, as some were suggesting earlier today. In addition, avoiding a fossil fuel energy hub would ensure that major job sectors in the city like healthcare, the arts, hospitality, and education are not threatened. People decide to stay or move to a city because of quality of life issues. Increases in toxic air pollution from energy hub infrastructure may cause some people to move away, may cause parents to think twice about sending their children to our colleges and universities, and may hurt the sectors that currently provide a lot of jobs and revenue to the city. the Philadelphia region has a potential for 8,700 megawatts of rooftop solar, equivalent to about 25% of the region's energy usage. Over 20 years, this equates to $1.3 billion in direct economic activity annually for the Philadelphia area. The indirect economic benefits, the annual economic activity would increase the number to $1.95 billion for the region annually. And Philadelphia could potentially get about 5% of this in the form of property sales, wage taxes. It would equate to about $97.5 million. About the same as earlier today. I think someone asked the question about LNG. How much would that bring in? It's about the same amount. It does not make economic sense to make such a substantial capital investment in expanding fossil fuel infrastructure when there are so many other more fruitful options and healthy and safe options. Clean Air Council urges City Council to reject the plan to turn Philadelphia into a gas energy hub and to embrace an economy for Philadelphia based on public health, education, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, you got it? You good? All right, whatever. Thank you for your testimony. I just want to, before you leave the table, let you know that the goals of these hearings is to examine all different parts. And none of us have made up our mind. We made up our mind not to sell PGW, which ended up to be a good choice, okay? But we have to move forward, and we have to see what's best for the city. So we are doing this, and this committee was formed for the best interest of the city and the people. We are being very cautious, thus the hearings. We were blindsided last time without having the education. And as when the former mayor of Pulaski came and spoke about Allentown, if you notice, a lot of us focused on him having hearings throughout the city, the 30, 40 hearings and all. So we want to make certain that we take the correct steps here. So we are being very cautious. I'm glad you want us to be cautious because that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you again for your testimony and have a great weekend.
All right, thanks, you too.
Would the clerk call the next witness, please?
Given limited time, I apologize, but the remainder of the guests are going to have to abide by a 3-minute rule. Sam Bernhardt.
You got the clock? Okay.
Good afternoon, evening, afternoon, one of those.
Good day, Sam. How's that?
All right. My name's Sam Bernhardt. I'm the senior Pennsylvania organizer for Food and Water Watch. We're a national advocacy organization working to champion healthy food and clean water for all. To that end, we're extremely concerned regarding the plan being put forward by the oil and gas industry to scale up fossil fuel infrastructure in and around our city for several reasons. But the reason I'm here today is to voice concern that this plan threatens Philadelphia's fiscal health through its reliance on public-private partnerships that are risky for this city. Food and Water Watch has expertise on the issue of public-private partnerships. I'll just refer to them as P3s, through our work on water privatization, which increasingly presents itself in the form of P3s. P3s are intrinsically risky for municipalities as they disproportionately oppose the public side of these deals to risk. Limited liability corporations can shield themselves from the fallout of financial, environmental, or public safety catastrophes. Academic reviews of P3s have found that many US P3s are a means of transferring investment risk from the private sector to the public sector. And that's a quote. In addition to the uncontrollable market forces or accidents or catastrophes, complexity and uncertainty involved in P3s leaves municipalities at an inherent disadvantage. P3s involving fossil fuels and energy infrastructure represent an increased level of risk due to their potential for accidents with large environmental or public health impacts. Gas pipelines leak, LNG being transported on trucks leaks, explosions happen. This is one of the reasons why energy ventures are frequently moved forward using special purpose vehicles, so these LLCs. We don't need to look very far to see what this looks like. Harrisburg has been crippled by debt resulting from a badly planned deal intended to increase the city's revenues by making upgrades to its incinerator, making upgrades to energy infrastructure. Does that sound familiar? Harrisburg's P3 around the incinerator was meant to create a cash cow for the city. Instead, it dragged the city into receivership. Now, proponents of Philadelphia's oil and gas industry are presenting council with P3s that could flood the city's coffers with new revenues from environmentally sound projects. This sounds eerily similar. It's important to remember that these advocates for the oil and gas industry, or really anyone who spoke before myself and Mr. Walker here today, are motivated by one thing, and it's their own bottom line. They're not motivated by the interests of the people of Philadelphia. My third quick thing to touch on is that more specifically to energy being risky is that the people who spoke before me here in this room are inherently risky. Mr. Rinaldi has a very limited track record with PES. 2 years is not a lot for the city of Philadelphia to bank its future on. One last thing I'd like to say is Mr. Pulowski, Mayor
Yeah,
Pulowski.
hold on. Your 3 minutes are up. That's what
Okay.
he's telling me. And before we, start going into speaking badly about a mayor or something else,
Okay.
I'd rather you not. Thank you for your testimony here today, Sam.
All right.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chris Hapner,
No?
Zane Nakota,
Hi, Zane. Can you pull the mic close to you and say your name for the record before you start your testimony?
Yes, my name is Zane Nakhoda, Z-E-I-N-N-A-K-H-O-D-A, and I appreciate the chance to speak today. And it's made me very curious about the procedure for today, because I really appreciate the chance to speak and the space that these hearings create, but I know that there are many folks in my constituency who couldn't afford to stay all day to testify. And I appreciate it a lot, and I just wish that I'm curious why there isn't more time and public voice isn't more of a priority in these hearings. I've been waiting very patiently today.
It's called the ability to endure 18 hours.
Right. But I will move quickly to my testimony.
You'll be able to come back at a future date if you'd like to leave your written testimony. We'll put it in the record, and we can have you back at our next one, because today as the chairwoman spoke, this is not over yet. And there's no decisions being made here today, just so everybody knows. So please, whatever you choose.
Great. Thank you. So my name is Zane Nakhoda, and I'm speaking on behalf of the 215 People's Alliance and the Maypop Collective for Climate and Economic Justice. 215 People's Alliance is an emerging coalition focused on building a progressive vision for working people across Philadelphia. And we believe Philadelphia's energy future and that adaptation to changing environmental conditions is increasingly important to working families' health, safety, and economic security over the long term. For this reason, we support council defending municipal ownership of PGW, and we uphold public ownership and local governance as paramount to the democratic energy future we need. The acquisition of UIL Holdings validates council's concerns around selling PGW. Consumers and workers should not be without a say or knowledge about decision-making of our utility services. And the proposed sale of UIL put good jobs, protections for seniors and low-income customers at risk, with inadequate protections for Philadelphia's workforce. As a publicly owned utility, PGW is obligated to protect the rights of low-income residents and working families. Philadelphians can keep PGW accountable through our elected officials in the case of increased rates, poor service, and in shaping the direction of our energy economy. While we applaud efforts to retain municipal ownership of PGW, we're concerned about proposals to have PGW anchor a fossil fuel energy hub in our city. Philadelphia must engage broader challenges of energy transition to protect against economic and environmental threats associated with fossil fuel extraction and transport and resultant climate change. Proposed fossil fuel infrastructure, including pipeline networks, oil by rail, gas liquefaction, and compressing stations, pose significant health and safety risks to Philadelphia residents and workers with questionable economic return to Philadelphians. Climate change, a product of decades of fossil fuel use, increasingly threatens Philadelphia's financial security and infrastructure. The frequency and magnitude of these storms, of superstorms, is increasing, along with the frequency of severe floods.
thank you.
I'm sorry?
Please
Your
finish your...
3 minutes are up, Zane.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity.
Would you give us that testimony so we can put it completely on the record for us, for the other members, so we can have that?
Sure, is there a place I can email another copy? This one's marked up pretty heavily.
Sure, you can email it to...
To me, ed.nielsen@phila.gov.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
online.
Steve Masters. Minal Raval.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your patience. I know you were here all day.
Yep, thank you all. I didn't know you all put such long days in. I'm impressed. I'm Minal Raval. I'm honored to be here today. Firstly, Councilman Johnson is not here, but I'd like to thank him and all of you, I guess, for acknowledging the risks of oil drains and the resolution you all passed yesterday.
Yes,
I represent a strong coalition of groups that you may have heard of, such as the Clean Air Council, which was founded in '67, Clean Water Action, founded in '72, the Delaware River Keeper Network in '88, Food and Water Watch in '05, and the Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, representing 43 member congregations, a group called Protecting Our Waters in '09, and Physicians for Social Responsibility. It goes on, and some groups you may not have known of, which is the Moms Clean Air Force and their nap time activism, the MAPOP Collective for Climate and Economic Justice, the Philadelphia Jewish Climate Action Network, and EDGE, encouraging development of a green economy. As you can see, we are quite a diverse group of Philadelphia residents. Like most of America, we look to you, our elected officials, as well as ourselves, to step up to the challenge of our times. The challenge we speak of, our changing climate and the need for carbon reduction. There's even a Penn Future poll amongst Pennsylvanians which shows that 82% want to cut carbon, 93% want help with energy efficiency, and over 60% believe switching to clean, renewable energy will create jobs. So we're concerned about building onto the fossil fuel-based economy that people talked about today, one that emits additional greenhouse gases, that contaminates our rivers, our drinking water, by fracking for gas and the overall polluting and unsafe infrastructure around this economy. In our vision, a moral vision we like to think, for a vibrant, healthy future, fossil fuels have been left in the last century. We see us as building a green economy based on energy efficiency, conservation, and clean, renewable energy sources. When there's a solar spill, people simply say, it's a nice day. I like that. So with the GreenWorks goal of making Philadelphia the greenest city in the country, what are we waiting for? We have a low-carbon transition economy to build. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony today. And thanks for
Tamara
hanging out.
Clements. Susan Sachs.
Good evening, Susan.
Hello. Thanks for putting up with me. My name is Susan Sachs. I'm a member of many of the groups that Minal just mentioned, probably some more. I'm here to speak about something you may not have heard of, which is how the same systemic racism that uses urban as a code for black and brown and guts our schools so that the rich and powerful don't have to pay their fair share of taxes also fuels the plan to sacrifice the health, safety, and future of our city so that a dying industry can grab the last drop of profit in its race to the bottom. Nobody says it better than investigative reporter and climate activist Naomi Klein. So I want to share a few excerpts from an article of hers that I'll leave for you to read in full later. On the second day of the now infamous United Nations Climate Summit in Copenhagen, a document was leaked showing that governments were on the verge of a target that would cap global temperature rise at 2 degrees Celsius. Not enough to save some low-lying small island states from annihilation, and in Africa, the target would translate into a full-scale humanitarian disaster. But African delegates weren't standing for it. You think holding up a sign is something? When the text was leaked, the sterile hallways of the conference center came alive with shouts of, "We will not die quietly," and 2 degrees is suicide.
The highly racialized discounting of certain lives does not play out just between countries, but also unfailingly within them, perhaps most dramatically within the United States. During Katrina, it was overwhelmingly New Orleans' Black residents who were abandoned on the rooftops and in the Superdome, who were labeled refugees in their own country, and who were shot on the streets of their city. When Superstorm Sandy hit New York City, a similar combination of forces showed its brutal face. Racism is what has allowed the worst health impacts of digging up, processing, and burning fossil fuels, from cancer clusters to asthma, to be systematically dumped on the neighborhoods where people of color live, work, and play. If we committed ourselves to responding to the climate crisis on the basis that Black lives matter, it would mean unprecedented economic and technological investments in some of the most neglected parts of the world, from Kenya to Ferguson to Pine Ridge, and dare I add, many parts of Philadelphia, bringing greatly improved services, increased democracy and self-determination, real food security, and countless good jobs. In Copenhagen 2009, African governments argued that if Black lives mattered, then 2 degrees of warming was too high. By disregarding this basic humanistic logic, the biggest polluters were making a crude cost-benefit analysis. They were calculating that the loss of life, livelihood, and culture for some of the poorest people on the planet was an acceptable price to pay to protect the economies of some of the richest people on the planet. That, my friends, is the twisted logic of the Phil Rinaldis of the world. The question is, will Philadelphia City Council side with the brutal calculus of corporate looters or with the people of our great city? Thank you, and here are copies of the full article for your consideration.
If you hand it to the, all right.
Moon
Our
Smith.
Sergeant of Arms, he will grab that off you.
Great.
Thank you,
Here
Susan, for
go.
your testimony. Thank you for your
But
patience today.
while he's here, Moon Smith had to leave and wanted to submit her testimony as a nurse and midwife on the impact of chemical and fossil fuel pollution on babies and families.
Thank you, and we will put that in the record for her
Thank
as
you.
well. Thank you.
Peter Winslow.
Let's get the Mood Smith. Let's put that over here. Yeah, let's take that to her, right? So for the record, we're going to put Moon Smith testimony into the record.
Good afternoon, I'm sorry. Please proceed.
Chairwoman Tasco, Councilman Nielsen, Councilman O. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this conversation. The hour is late. I'll be brief. My name is Peter Winslow. I'm the president of the Evolve Foundation. Evolve was founded by Rob Stewart, who is a public citizen and known to many members of the council, and I carry on his legacy. I'm also here as a member of the board of the Philadelphia and the Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. Evolve has been the fiscal sponsor for some of the organizations that have been mentioned previously, specifically protecting our waters. As we reflect on, as you reflect on much of what has been heard today, I'd like to share some observations that I have in reaction to what I heard. I was impressed very much by Mr. White and the position that he took as a fiduciary responsible for assuring that the citizens of Philadelphia have adequate heat and other resources that are supplied by PGW. He seems like a very good CEO for the council to be entrusting that aspect of its operations and the city's assets, and I applaud the activity of the council and not giving away such a valuable asset as PGW and a deal that was not a good one. He did, however, say that the problem of his infrastructure was under control, and that was refuted by people who spoke later on. And I think I would agree with those who spoke later that the state of the infrastructure of PGW is not good. From the standpoint of direct public safety, of accidents and loss of life through explosions and such, it's a moderate risk.
but the ongoing detrimental effects of the atmosphere from leakages, many leakages, from very substandard system is really quite serious. And one of the things that I understand is on the mind of the council is finding a way to have sufficient resources, financial resources, to solve this problem. And I appreciate the efforts that are being put into finding that kind of a solution. The other reaction I'd like to make is to what Mr. Rinaldi has put forth. And this seems to me to be relying on a field of dreams approach. If you build it, they will come. Asserting facts that are not in evidence, that the manufacturing would flow from the availability of energy. I think that's really putting the horse before the cart. And if, in fact, goes fast.
It does, it goes fast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter,
Have a good
for your
weekend.
testimony. Thank you for being patient today.
My pleasure.
You can leave your testimony here, Sergeant
These are
Walsh.
not written, prepared remarks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The final speaker is Corin Wolk.
Is there anyone else here to testify before us today under public comment? If not, this committee is in recess until the call of the chairs.
Yes.
That's it. Have a great weekend, everybody. And for the record, we do work later than this because I have 4 more appointments this evening, just so you know.
My
And,
heart truly goes out to you.
and it is St. Patty's Day weekend, so you can only imagine what our calendars look like. And unfortunately, we have to go to a funeral tomorrow for one of our fallen officers, and we'll be there. So if you can, please keep him and his family in your
In our
prayers and
prayers.
hearts.
We
Thank
sure
you.
will. Next time you invite us back, could Phil Rinaldi sit all day and listen to us, have unlimited time to really talk about how you can change the rules, but you can't change the facts?